Chapter 4584. This was indeed an undersea feast, but the host of the feast was not the hundreds of fierce sea beasts that had gathered. They were just food on the table, nothing more. Lenny looked at the shocking scene in his mind, and suddenly became speechless. He watched the super sea beast, that looked like a giant electric eel, surged out, and devoured all the sea beasts that were electrocuted by it. Even Lenny couldn't help but have an urge to kneel down and surrender to it. After eating everything, the giant electric eel only left the bloody and tempting sea beast corpse, and it turned around and lurked in the deep sand again, waiting for prey to take the bait again. Lenny looked at this scene thoughtfully. The ghost once said that although the sea beasts and the spirit beasts were both beasts, they were completely different systems. To some extent, the spirit beasts were not much different from human cultivators. Their long lives were mainly focused on cultivation. However, the sea beasts were different. No matter how powerful the sea beasts were, they still maintained an extremely high bestial nature. Therefore, they rarely took the initiative to cultivate. For them, eating blood was the best way to cultivate. The higher the level of existence they ate, the faster their strength would increase. This was a pure law of nature. The law of the jungle was vividly reflected in them. However, compared to the way of survival of the sea beasts, what interested Lenny more was another thing: the dark purple electric arc that flashed by just now. Lenny had been carefully observing from the beginning. The hundreds of sea beasts that were attracted by the smell of blood were at least above the mysterious ascending stage. There were many sea beasts that were at the mountain opening stage, and there were even more than one at the sea splitting stage. However, with just a flash of electric arc, all the sea beasts were electrocuted without any suspense. What a terrifying strength! At that moment, Lenny once again experienced what it meant to be creeped out. However, in addition to the fear in his heart, he did not know why he had a strange impulse. In his mind, he kept recalling the scene of the deep purple electric arc streaking across, and the restless feeling became more and more intense. Out of his instinct to constantly become stronger, Lenny subconsciously wanted to imitate it. Unfortunately, this scene was too fast and too short. Even if he kept replaying it in his mind, he couldn't see it clearly. Lenny had the instinctive urge to imitate it, but he couldn't grasp its essence. The memory fragments that were reflected in his mind continued. The giant electric eel was still lurking in the sand in the deep gully. However, this time, it did not attract those bloodthirsty sea beasts. In fact, the previous time, all the powerful sea beasts within 100 miles had been eaten clean. If they wanted to catch another wave of sea beasts, they would have to wait for a few months. However, this time, an uninvited guest came after just a few hours. 5 Poison Dragon. Looking at the existence in the memory fragments from afar, Lin Yi's eyes suddenly narrowed. This time, it was a dragon that shone with 5 different colors. This appearance was exactly the same as the most powerful 5 elements killing intent that he had seen before, but it felt more real. Its body was larger, and its aura was more threatening. He'd never seen a 5 Poison Jiao dragon before, but Lenny was certain that this was a 5 Poison Jiao dragon. He slowly swam to the side of the sea beast's corpse. After the 5 Poison dragons circled around it, it did not eagerly open its mouth to devour like the other sea beasts. After all, it was a true super spiritual beast. Although eating flesh and blood was still effective for it, it was not as attractive as eating sea beasts. Moreover, a few hours ago, over 100 powerful sea beasts had died here. There was still a thick killing intent lingering in the surrounding seawater. Even Lin Yi could easily sense that something was wrong, let alone the 5 Poison Dragon. The giant electric eel seemed to be very patient. No matter how the 5 Poison Dragon swam back and forth, it just hid in the deep sand and did not move. Although its body was huge, it perfectly blended in with its surroundings. Even the aura of its body was no different from its surroundings. Even though Lin Yi knew that it was hiding here, he could not find it after a moment of distraction. He could not see any flaws at all. Only the unique perspective in the memory fragments told Lin Yi that this super electric eel had not really quietened down. It had been closely watching the 5 Poison Dragons, every move from beginning to end. It seemed to be ready to make a move at any time, ready to electrocute it to death, and then eat it to its heart's content. An almost undetectable electric current spread throughout the surrounding sea, covering a range of thousands of miles. However, because it was too weak, no creature in the sea could sense anything strange. This was a unique sensing method that belonged to the giant electric eel. It did not have eyes, nor did it use divine sense. However, these tiny electric currents were far more effective than divine sense. They were clearer and left no traces. The five-poisoned dragon was the same as the other creatures in the sea. It did not seem to sense the existence of the giant electric eel at all. After circling the sea beast's corpse twice, it finally prepared to eat it. However, at this moment, the deep purple electric arc that had appeared before descended once again. Lin Yi's heart immediately tightened. Seeing that the five-poisoned dragon was about to follow in the footsteps of the hundreds of powerful sea beasts, he did not expect that the five-poisoned dragon, which had been struck by the deep purple electric arc, would suddenly turn into a phantom formed from vital energy, and then quickly dissipated. The true body of the five-poisoned dragon had unknowingly appeared on top of the giant electric eel's head. Accompanied by an earth-shaking dragon roar, it waved its front claws, and a stream of five-colored vital energy instantly pierced through the giant electric eel's body. Seeing this, Lin Yi's eyelids suddenly trembled. After cultivating in the underground space for so long, his familiarity with the five elements' murderous aura could be said to be unparalleled. The stream of five-colored vital energy that the five-poisoned dragon had released was clearly an enhanced version of the five elements' murderous aura. If there was any difference between the two, it would be that it did not have the kind of natural intelligence that was born on its own. Instead, it was more easily controlled. When Lin Yi first saw the five elements' murderous aura, the ghost had said that as long as his strength was strong enough, he would be able to release a stream of five elements' murderous aura with a wave of his hand. At that time, Lin Yi had yearned to be able to do it himself. However, he did not have the extravagant hope of reaching this step in his subsequent cultivation. This was because with his current strength, it was impossible for him to activate the five elements' murderous aura. Chapter 4585. As he sighed with emotion, the memory fragments reflected in Lin Yi's mind suddenly became intense. The five elements' murderous aura of the five poisons flood dragon did not kill it in one blow. Instead, it completely stimulated the ferocity of the giant electric eel. When a super sea beast that could even swallow an existence at the sea-splitting stage went berserk, this scene was tantamount to the end of the world. The surging battle intent and the sharp murderous aura seemed to be the only two things left between heaven and earth, covering the sky and covering the earth in all directions. Out of his instinct to protect himself, Lin Yi subconsciously wanted to escape from this terrible and dangerous battlefield. Even if he only saw this scene in the memory fragments, the terrifying pressure that seemed to have materialized still made him breathless. However, just like at the beginning, Lin Yi had already fallen into the memory fragments and could not extricate himself. At this moment he could not control his own will at all. The scene of the destructive battle between the five poisons flood dragon and the giant electric eel was deeply imprinted in his mind uncontrollably. Even if he closed his eyes, everything was always clear. In an instant, Lin Yi's whole body began to tremble violently like a sieve. He was on the verge of collapse. Just as the ghostly thing could not help but want to interrupt, Lin Yi suddenly stopped moving and entered a strange state. TSK, is this kid really blessed, or is his innate talent so unique? How can he always encounter such good things that others can't even dream of? The ghostly thing could not help but be amazed. At this moment, Lin Yi had once again entered an extremely mysterious state of epiphany. However, it was different from the unconscious awakening of his divine sense last time. This time, to see what he could comprehend, he would only know after he woke up. The only thing the ghostly thing could do now was to keep a lookout for him. This opportunity could not be asked for. The book-seeking net must not be interrupted by external forces. At this moment, in Lin Yi's sea of consciousness, the five poisons flood dragon and the giant electric eel were fighting fiercely. Powerful five elements, murderous aura, and deep purple electric arcs were constantly colliding between heaven and earth. Every time they collided, the world changed color. For the surrounding seas and even the entire ocean, it was like they had experienced an apocalyptic disaster. At this time, Lenny once again felt the stirring instinctively when he first saw the dark purple electric arc. However, this time, he was not imitating the dark purple electric arc, but the five elements murderous aura released by the five poison dragon. After all, Lenny had a deep understanding of the five elements murderous aura, and now that he saw the five poison serpent using it again and again, it was as if he had a ready-made teacher. It was an obvious opportunity for him to learn, and if he didn't hurry up and learn, that Lenny was really stupid. Be it the five poison flood dragon, or the giant electric eel, they were both super ferocious beasts that should not exist in this world. Furthermore, they seemed to be on par with each other in terms of strength. This unprecedented battle did not end in just a few moves. Instead, it unexpectedly fell into a stalemate of attrition. The more they fought, the angrier they became. In the end, they used all their trump cards and entered a state of fighting to the death. This benefited Lin Yi, who was a bystander. Otherwise, if the five poison flood dragon's attack was also like the giant electric eel's deep purple electric arc, the battle ended in a flash. If it ended in a flash, he would not even be able to tell how it attacked, let alone learn it secretly. But now, disregarding everything else, the five poison flood dragon had activated the five elements murderous chi no less than 100 times. The entire activation process was clearly seen by Lin Yi, who was a bystander and a peeping scholar. In addition, he already had a deep understanding of the five elements murderous chi. Learning it secretly was naturally twice the result with half the effort. This was especially so for Lin Yi, who was currently immersed in a rare state of epiphany. Regardless of whether it was his insight or his ability to practice, they were far from ordinary. Normally, he would not even dare to think about it. At this moment, he instinctively began to do things, learning bit by bit. Every time the five poison flood dragon activated the five elements murderous chi, Lin Yi would try to imitate it. Although he was confused at first, after repeating it over 100 times, Lin Yi's actions gradually began to look more like it. They were both murderous chi of the five elements. Although the murderous chi that was activated by the five poison flood dragon and the murderous chi that was formed naturally were essentially the same, they were two completely different things if one were to truly deconstruct them. The former was a powerful martial art that could be controlled by cultivators, while the latter was a powerful force that belonged to the heavens and earth. It could not be desecrated, nor could it be imitated. After an unknown amount of time, a faint stream of vital energy suddenly overflowed from Lin Yi's palm. In terms of power, it was completely unsightly. Any cultivator in the foundational stage could easily destroy it. However, after sensing this vital energy, even the ghostly thing could not help but be a little surprised. This was actually a murderous chi of the five elements. Although it was very weak, it was indeed a five-colored vital energy. The five elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were all present. There was no doubt that this was a real murderous chi of the five elements. He actually managed to learn it. This kid is really a freak. After being stunned for a while, the ghostly thing faintly cried out in shock. It did say that as long as one was strong enough, one could activate the murderous chi of the five elements, but that was at least after the mountain opening stage. Right now, Lin Yi was only at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. From the ghostly thing's point of view, a move like the murderous chi of the five elements was a terrifying martial art that could kill anyone in the mountain opening stage, or even higher. Now it was mastered by a kid at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. What kind of scene would that be? Once Lin Yi truly displayed the murderous chi of the five elements, that scene would definitely not be as simple as fighting against an enemy of a higher level. It would feel like a 3-year-old suddenly taking out a gun from his pocket. It was not a toy gun, but a real gun that could really take a person's life. Even with the ghostly thing's experience and knowledge, when he thought of that scene, he sincerely shuddered. After spending so much time with Lin Yi, He had always thought that Lin Yi was a monster among the human beings. However, now that he thought about it, not only human beings, but all the creatures in the world were definitely abnormal existences. He was definitely even more abnormal than the former Azure Dragon. After successfully activating the murderous chi of the 5 elements for the first time, Lin Yi's face did not show any expression of joy. Instead, he continued to immerse himself in that state, still repeating it over and over again. The intensity of the murderous chi of the 5 elements became stronger little by little. Every time he practiced it, it became stronger. In the beginning, it was only at the level of the foundation building stage. Gradually, it became the level of the golden core stage, and then the level of the nascent soul stage. Finally, he could fully activate it with ease, and it became a brand new martial art that belonged to Lin Yi alone. Chapter 4586. After mastering the murderous aura of the 5 elements, Lin Yi did not stop. After all, there was no harm in learning more skills. After secretly learning from the 5 poison dragon, he turned his attention to the giant electric eel and began to study the dark purple electric arc. Since it could compete with the murderous aura of the 5 elements for so long without being at a disadvantage, Lin Yi believed that if he could learn it and use it for himself, it would be a heaven-defying martial skill that would not be inferior to the murderous aura of the 5 elements. This would be a powerful trump card that would come in handy in the future. However, this time, no matter how much Lin Yi practiced, he could not grasp the key. This dark purple electric arc was obviously a move of the thunder attribute. Lin Yi did not have the thunder attribute, so he could not use it as it was. He could only try to understand the essence of it, and then simulate it with the fire attribute martial skill. This was not a wrong idea. The martial skills in the world were all the same. It was not that Lin Yi had not done similar things before, but it was different this time. Once he mastered this dark purple electric arc, it would definitely be a top-level martial skill. It was not easy to understand it. Moreover, he had just successfully understood the murderous aura of the 5 elements. It was not that he had the talent of all 5 elements, but that he had been dealing with the murderous aura of the 5 elements for more than half a year. He had a deep understanding of it, which was why he was able to master it so quickly. However, this dark purple electric arc of the giant electric eel was something he had never seen before. How could he understand it? It was not that Lin Yi did not understand this, but this opportunity was too rare. He did not want to give up so easily. Naturally, the more top-level martial skills, the better. If he missed this opportunity, there would not be another one. Lin Yi might not be able to see a super sea beast like the giant electric eel in his lifetime. Even if he had no clue, Lin Yi persisted in practicing. If 100 times did not work, then 200 times. If 200 times did not work, then 500 times. As long as he persisted, he believed that he would see results. Lin Yi's perseverance was undeniable. No matter how clueless he was, he could still persevere. However, after trying for 600 or 700 times, the memory fragment that was reflected in his mind suddenly shattered. His entire consciousness seemed to be torn apart. The pain was unbearable, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood on the spot. Lin Yi's face was deathly pale, and it took him a long time to finally recover. Things had developed to this point, and it was difficult to continue, because the memory fragments had been shattered. No matter how strong his willpower was, it was useless. He could only accept his fate, and accept reality. After trying so hard for so long, he was still unable to comprehend a complete martial technique from the huge electric eel. This result made Lin Yi feel somewhat disheartened. However, Lin Yi did not really become depressed. After all, he had successfully learned the 5 elements murderous aura. With this heaven-defying martial skill as a foundation, it could be said that he had gained a great harvest this time. Although it was not a small regret that he could not comprehend the giant electric eel's thunder martial skill, fate was bound to come to an end soon. Lin Yi was not a greedy person. What's more, it was only the 5 elements murderous aura. Lin Yi's combat power had increased by more than several times. He was the strongest nascent soul stage master, who had a perfect breakthrough. He was confident that he could deal with the peak nascent soul stage master, when he was at the peak of the early nascent soul stage, and now that he had mastered the 5 elements murderous aura. Even if he encountered a profound ascending stage master, he still had the capital to fight. A mere peak early Yuanying stage was enough to compete with a master of the profound ascending stage. If even this was not enough, if he was still not satisfied, then Lin Yi would really be spurned to death by the world's heroes. How could others live? Sigh, what a pity. Lin Yi shook his head slightly. It was not because he could not comprehend the lightning martial technique. Instead, it was because the memory fragments that entered his mind had suddenly shattered into many incomplete fragments. It was impossible for him to comprehend anything of value from them. However, through these fragmented memory fragments, Lin Yi could more or less see the aftermath. The battle between the 5 poison dragon and the giant electric eel didn't have a clear winner. After fighting for who knows how long, it finally ended in a lose-lose situation. Because the battle was too big, the process of fighting had attracted the attention of many super existences. Although they didn't dare to approach because they were afraid of the pressure of the 5 poison dragon and the giant electric eel, once they were given the opportunity to attack, no matter who won this battle, it would be a dead end. The 5 poison dragon wasn't stupid, and the giant electric eel wasn't stupid either. When they both noticed that something was wrong, the 2 super monsters chose to stop fighting at the same time. So even if they were seriously injured, because neither of them died, those who were watching from afar couldn't figure out their strength, so none of them dared to act rashly. After 1,000 years, fight again. This was the message left by the 5 poison dragon before it left. The giant electric eel's response was a pillar of lightning that shot into the sky. It used the most domineering and arrogant method to accept this challenge. At the same time, it completely scared away those who were watching it. After confirming that the 5 poisons flood dragon had completely disappeared from this region of the sea, the giant electric eel slowly dragged its battered body back to its original hiding place to recover. However, its injuries were far too severe. It did not know how long it had been, perhaps years, perhaps decades, or even centuries. In the end, it was unable to recover its vitality, and its tremendous vitality slowly disappeared from its body. Finally, it became the corpse that stood before them. As for the 5 poisons flood dragon, it had never appeared again. Perhaps it was dead as well. After all, its injuries were not much lighter than the giant electric eel's. Of course, it was also possible that it was still alive. It was just hiding somewhere and licking its wounds, waiting for a comeback. The memory fragments stopped there. In the end, Lin Yi didn't see the end of the 5 poison dragon. However, according to his speculation, it probably suffered the same fate as the giant electric eel. This was not only because of its heavy injuries, but also because it didn't return to the mysterious space beneath the 5 poison swamp. According to the 5 poison dragon, that place had always been the territory of the 5 poison dragon. The 5 elements killing intent was fatal to other spiritual beasts, but it was a great supplement to the 5 poison dragon. If the 5 poison dragon wanted to heal, it would definitely return to the mysterious space as soon as possible. However, it didn't do so, which meant that something must have happened during the process, and it was very likely that it died. Chapter 4587. After all, its master had never walked through this exit, so it was unlikely that he would suddenly appear in the sea. Furthermore, their strengths did not match. This 5 poison flood dragon and the giant electric eel were both existences above the sea-splitting stage, while the 5 poison dragon's master was only at the sea-splitting stage. N is an element of when he thought of the 5 poison flood dragon and the giant electric eel. These 2 terrifying existences, one had fallen, and the other was very likely to fall. Lin Yi could not help but sigh. The world was unpredictable. If the 2 of them were still alive, especially the 5 poison flood dragon, the situation in the entire South Continent would probably be very different. At the very least, the vermilion bird would not be able to act as he pleased as he did now. It would be very difficult for the tragedy that had happened to the 5 poison dragon's master to repeat itself. After all, this guy's strength was too ferocious and unreasonable. Even the vermilion bird might not be able to do anything to it. As Lenny sighed, the fragmented memory in his mind fell apart even more. In the end, it turned into powder and completely disappeared, as if it had never existed. The surrounding sea suddenly became calm again, and it was an unprecedented calm. There was no trace of the mountain-like pressure that Lenny had felt before. Lenny was slightly startled. The obsession left by the giant electric eel had disappeared. Could it be that the memory fragment was its obsession? When the memory fragment shattered, its obsession also disappeared. Lenny was stunned for a long time. He carefully recalled the situation just now, and then came to a sudden realization. Did I accept its inheritance? Of course it counts. Although it didn't directly bestow you with strength, the memory itself is the most precious inheritance. Not to mention, you were able to comprehend a martial skill like the 5 elements killing chi. I have to say, you are really lucky. Even I am a little envious. The ghostly thing half-jokingly said. I see. Lenny took a deep breath and nodded with some regret. It seems that I really have to thank the sea beast. It and the 5 poison flood dragon can be considered half a master to me. It's just that I don't even know what race it is. So I won't be able to pay my respects to it in the future. What a pity. There's nothing to be pitiful about. You were able to comprehend the 5 elements killing chi from its lingering obsession. This is your own ability and fortune. In turn, it has to thank you properly. The ghostly thing said disapprovingly. Ha! What do you mean? Lenny couldn't help but ask curiously. If you hadn't interfered, this obsession of his would definitely have continued to exist, and he would be unable to free himself from it for all eternity. I don't need to say any more about how tragic it is. But now that the obsession is gone, it can be considered to have finished what it started. Don't you think it should be thanking you? The ghostly thing laughed. Alright, so that's how it is. Lenny smiled, but he still bowed deeply to the corpse of the giant electric eel. In any case, he was the one who benefited from it, and he was always grateful to this super sea monster. He did not dare to forget this inheritance. It's a pity that this guy's primordial spirit has perished, and he's been reduced to this last bit of obsession. There's nothing substantial that can be passed on to you. You can only comprehend it by yourself through memory fragments. Otherwise, you'll definitely gain more this time. That's the real big opportunity. The ghostly thing felt sorry for Lenny. To miss out on such an opportunity that only comes once in 10,000 years. It was truly a pity. Just a small piece of memory was enough for him to understand the 5 elements of murderous aura. If it was a complete inheritance like the 5 Bane Dragon, he would have been able to understand it. What would that be like? That's impossible. If this sea beast senior really does have a complete primordial soul, then it's impossible. Why would he pass it on to me for no reason? After all, I'm not a sea beast, nor am I its disciple. Perhaps its first reaction will be to seize my body and be reborn. Lenny laughed heartily. He didn't feel any regret at all. There were no ifs in this world, and he didn't have the habit of fantasizing. That's true. The ghostly thing smiled. It understood after thinking about it. Even if it didn't want to seize Yi Shiwen's body and be reborn, it would never seek its own death by passing on everything to a human it didn't know. It was better to live than to die. Its fragmented primordial spirit was better than being dead. While Lenny was talking to the ghostly thing, the huge corpse in front of him suddenly collapsed for some unknown reason. The originally majestic behemoth collapsed in a short period of time, turning into a large pile of powder that quickly drifted away with the sea current. All this happened without warning. Lenny looked at the empty space in front of him and couldn't help but be stunned. He couldn't say a word for a long time. What's going on? Lenny finally asked after a long time. He almost bit his tongue off. As you can see, the corpse collapsed. The ghostly thing didn't seem surprised at all. Isn't that a little too fast? It was clearly fine before. How did it collapse just like that? Lenny couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He had tried to break off the scales before. Although it was interrupted because of the sudden influx of memory fragments, there was absolutely no doubt that the corpse was extremely strong. Previously, its obsession hadn't dissipated, so it could still maintain the corpse in its original state. But now, without the umbrella of obsession, this corpse is equivalent to an unearthed cultural relic that suddenly sees the light of day again. Isn't this a common situation in your secular world? Think about how old this corpse is. Even if it's not 1,000 years old, looking at its posture, it must be at least a few hundred years old. If it wasn't for the obsession, there wouldn't be any bones left. The corrosion of the sea is much stronger than that of the ground, the ghostly thing explained. Okay, so that's what happened. I thought I accidentally touched some taboo. Lenny breathed a sigh of relief with some lingering fear. Then, a look of regret appeared on his face. He originally wanted to get some treasures from this corpse. With the terrifying power of the giant eel, he believed that whatever he got from this corpse would be the most precious treasure in the world. But now he didn't have the chance. Hee, don't think about those useless things anymore. I advise you to hurry up and go, kid. If you stay here for a while, I'm afraid we'll have to accompany this guy, the ghostly thing suddenly reminded with a strange smile. Chapter 4588. Thinking of this, Lenny did not dare to neglect and quickly ordered the spirit bird to leave the bottom of the sea as soon as possible. Although his combat power had skyrocketed, if he was really entangled by sea beasts in such a place, the possibility of escaping was almost zero. The speed of the spirit bird was extremely fast, even in this endless sea, because Lenny had been isolating the seawater with his genuine chi. Its speed could not be underestimated. In any case, it was a spirit beast of the original soul stage, so it was impossible for it to be helpless in the sea. Lenny was afraid of being entangled by sea beasts, but the spirit bird was even more afraid. At this moment, the terrifying speed that erupted at this moment made Lenny a little stunned. He had always thought that the spirit bird had no strong points except for speed. Now it seemed that this was not wrong. Speed was indeed this bird's specialty, and the endless sea could not stop it. Lenny was secretly speechless. With the speed that the spirit bird showed at this moment, many native sea beasts might not be able to catch up with it. He even suspected that this guy was originally a water bird, but it had not been discovered before. While he was thinking about it, the spirit bird had already carried Lenny into the sky, like a sharp arrow piercing through the sea and across the sky. The whole process was a mess, and from beginning to end, they were not targeted by any sea beasts. After more than half a year, this was the first time that he could really see the light of day again. The depressed state of mind that had been suppressed for a long time was finally released. Lenny felt that his whole body was a lot lighter. Combined with this scene at this time, it was quite a transcendent posture of a bird flying in the sky. It's really dangerous. Lenny looked down and found that at the place where he rushed up, there were several huge shadows at this moment. Although he could not tell what kind of sea beasts they were, judging from their size, they should not be easy to deal with. Lenny could not help but secretly feel lucky that he ran fast enough, otherwise, he would really be in danger. After calming down a little, Lenny immediately let the spirit bird fly in the direction of the North Island. This time, because he was chased by the old sect of West Mountain, he had exceeded the time limit of the task for a long time. He didn't know if anything had happened in the North Island. At this moment, Lenny was eager to go home. Although he was not a native of the North Island, on this Heaven Stage Island, the North Island was his second hometown. All the familiar people and things were in the North Island. In his heart, the North Island was incomparable to other places. The spirit bird chirped excitedly, and immediately spread its wings to fly towards the north. Its current excitement was even greater than Lin Yi's. It wasn't that it was attached to Beidao. It was just that ever since it had reached the original infant stage, it could finally test its extreme speed. The spirit bird clan had an instinctive pursuit of speed. If they were not allowed to experience the extreme speed that they were so proud of from time to time, they would really go crazy. The spirit bird that Huang Xiaotao had left behind had been restrained for over 3 months. If it was not allowed to soar to its heart's content, it might really go crazy. This spirit bird is quite interesting, the ghostly thing suddenly said with great interest. What's wrong? Lenny couldn't help but feel strange when he heard it. At this moment, He was a little shocked by the speed of the spirit bird he was sitting on. He originally thought that this spirit bird's talent was mediocre. Even if its strength had skyrocketed, its speed would at most increase by a few times. But now it seemed that it was not just a few times, it was simply dozens of times. Do you know that the spirit bird is recognized as the most useless clan among all the spirit beasts? The ghostly thing asked instead of answering. Huh, it can't be right? Lenny grinned disapprovingly. Although the spirit bird couldn't compare to many other powerful spirit beasts he had seen, it was recognized as the most useless. That was a bit exaggerated. There were so many spirit beasts in the world, and there was always one that was weaker than the spirit bird. I'm not the one who said that. It's something recognized by the spirit beast clan. The ghostly thing smiled and then added, in my opinion, even if the spirit bird clan isn't really the weakest, it's definitely one of them. There's no doubt about that. Why? Lenny still couldn't figure it out. The reason is very simple. Every spirit beast clan has their own unique racial talent. Some are strong, some are weak, and there's a variety of them. But one thing is for sure. All spirit beasts have racial talent. There's only one clan that's an exception, and that's the spirit bird. The ghostly thing explained. Huh. Lenny was instantly stunned. This was the first time he had heard of this. But after thinking about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. Every spirit beast he had seen before had racial talent. Even the skybolt pig, which had zero combat power, had a unique treasure hunting talent. He had never seen this spirit bird before. Although its level wasn't low, the spirit bird didn't seem to be much different from other ordinary birds. If it wasn't for the fact that they can rely on the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to cultivate, they wouldn't have been classified as a spirit beast. A spirit beast clan that doesn't even have racial talent. Don't you think they're the weakest? The ghostly thing paused for a moment, then said, the spirit bird doesn't have any racial talent. If you really want to find a specialty, the only thing that barely meets this standard is their speed. But that's all. There are more than one or two clans that are faster than them. Alright, that sounds really sad. Lenny was speechless as he looked at the spirit bird. This thing wasn't just average, it simply didn't have any talent at all. If it was another original infant stage spirit beast, then it would definitely be a powerful fighting force that couldn't be ignored. But this was a spirit bird. So what if it was in the original infant stage? If he really forced it to fight, then it would at most be an enlarged version of a poultry. That kind of scene was something that Lin-E couldn't bear to look at. Don't be in a hurry to be disappointed. Although the spirit bird clan doesn't have any natural talent, it doesn't mean that they don't have a chance to turn things around. According to what I know, they are the only spirit beast clan that can cultivate their speed to the extreme. Although they are a special case, at least they have potential. The ghostly thing said, cultivate their speed to the extreme? Didn't you just say that there are more than one or two clans that are faster than them? Lenny was confused. Chapter 4589. Senior, you mean to say that this fellow is also a heavenly spirit bird? Hearing this, Lenny immediately became excited. A heavenly spirit bird's strength meant that he would have more help. If it really was a heavenly spirit bird with unparalleled speed, then it would definitely be of great use in the future. That's hard to say. The heavenly spirit bird clan has only produced one heavenly spirit bird in a few thousand years. As for whether this fellow has the chance to become the next heavenly spirit bird, I can't see it. The ghostly thing curled its lips. Then why did you say so much? Lenny was momentarily speechless. He had been happy for nothing. I'm telling you this because I suddenly realized that this fellow's speed is much faster than other spirit birds. Maybe it has some special characteristics in this area. Don't think too much about it. The ghostly thing laughed. Faster than other spirit birds? How much faster? Ling Yi's interest was piqued. Compared to other nascent soul stage spirit birds of the same level, its speed is at least 3 times faster. I'm not too sure about the specifics. Maybe it's because it's soaked in the star-ink milk with you. The ghostly thing thought for a moment before replying. 3 times faster? That's already very exaggerated. Senior, now that you mention it, I feel that this fellow might really be a heavenly spirit bird. Ling Yi's eyes lit up when he heard this. The star ink milk's effect on spirit beasts was far less than that of human cultivators. If it was purely because of the star ink milk, it would at most be twice as fast as other nascent soul stage spirit birds. 3 times faster was simply impossible. Hee hee kid, don't be so wishful thinking. Whether or not it's a heavenly spirit bird depends on its future. The higher its level, the greater its speed advantage. Only then will it have a slight chance of becoming a heavenly spirit bird. Otherwise it's all nonsense. The ghostly thing said nonchalantly. Although it was the one who started this topic, it really didn't think that this fellow could become a heavenly spirit bird. After all, the possibility of it becoming a heavenly spirit bird was too slim. It was even rarer than winning the lottery in the mortal world. Even if there's only a 1 in a million chance, it's still a chance. It's still a chance. It's better than nothing. Lenny grinned. Since there was nothing else to do, he didn't have the mood to meditate and cultivate for the time being. Thus, he sat on the back of the spirit bird and continued to chat with the ghostly thing, treating it as an eye-opener. After an hour, Lenny was already far away from the South Island and the sea area of the South Continent. After all, the speed of the spirit bird was much faster than before. Although the sea area of the South Continent was vast, it was nothing compared to its extreme speed Lenny was thinking about when he could return to North Island. Suddenly, he felt an inexplicable sense of panic in his heart. At the same time, the warning sound of the jade pendant rang out. A huge shadow suddenly covered the top of his head, and a cold murderous aura assaulted his face. Lenny was startled. It couldn't be the West Mountain Elder again, could it? He clearly didn't use the exit of the 5 Poisons Swamp. The West Mountain Old Master shouldn't have been able to detect him at all. If he was caught even then, how could he live? Lenny raised his head to take a look, and his heart relaxed. Fortunately, it was not the West Mountain Sect Master. Lenny relaxed, but the spirit bird under him looked very panicked, because the shadow came from a giant ferocious bird 10 feet away from his head. And it was a ferocious bird that Lenny was familiar with, the ghost-eyed golden eagle. Judging from the momentum, the strength of this ghost-eyed golden eagle should be at the middle stage of Yuanying realm. At the moment, a pair of gloomy ghost eyes were staring at him maliciously. It seemed that it would pounce on him at any time. Lenny looked at the golden-eyed eagle above him, who was glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey, and then looked at his spirit bird, which was trembling with fear. He couldn't help but sigh. He was not afraid of not knowing what was good, but he was afraid of comparing. When the ghostly thing said that the spirit bird was the most useless spirit beast, he didn't think much of it. Now with the comparison, it was obvious who was superior. Whether it was the appearance or the momentum, the ghost-eyed golden eagle won without any suspense. As for the strength, there was no need to talk about it. His spirit bird's trembling appearance had already shown everything. Even the speed that it was best at, the ghost-eyed golden eagle could easily catch up. It was a complete defeat in all aspects. As the ghostly thing said, the speed of the spirit bird could only be regarded as above average. Even if Huang Xiaotao was much faster than the other spirit birds, at present, it could only be regarded as above average. However, the ghost-eyed golden eagle was second to none in terms of speed, not to mention its strength was a level higher. Catching up with the spirit bird at the moment was not a problem at all for it. The future is long. If you can become a heavenly spirit bird, it will be easy to play with it. Lenny smiled and comforted it. Although he knew that the other party was up to no good, he was still very relaxed at this time. With strength, there was confidence. Of course, there was nothing to panic about. Heavenly spirit bird? What kind of bullshit was that? You want to easily play with my ghost-eyed golden eagle to death? Such big words, does your family know? At this time, a rough voice suddenly came from the back of the ghost-eyed golden eagle. It's just a joke. I'm sorry to have made you laugh. Lenny nodded slightly. He had long noticed that there was someone on the back of the ghost-eyed golden eagle. However, to him, as long as it wasn't a big shot like the Shishan Elder, there was nothing to be afraid of. It would be best if they lived in peace. However, if the other party really dared to make a move, it would be a good time to test the power of the 5 elements killing aura. A joke. But from your tone, why do I feel like it's true? Along with the man's voice, the ghost-eyed golden eagle suddenly lowered its altitude. Its sharp claws carried a frightening astral wind, almost tearing people apart. If it wasn't for the spirit bird dodging in time, it would have suffered a great loss immediately. After pulling a little distance between them, Lenny looked coldly at the middle-aged man on the back of the ghost-eyed golden eagle. It was a typical curly-bearded man. His whole body exuded a fierce and domineering aura that made people's hearts palpitate. However, what made Lenny a little surprised was that this guy was actually wearing a pair of sunglasses. For a moment, Lenny even thought that he had returned to the secular world. However, he immediately reacted. With the central chamber of commerce blossoming everywhere on Heaven's Stage Island, these products of the secular world had long become popular on Heaven's Stage Island. Even high-tech products like computers were popular, let alone a small pair of sunglasses. It had to be said that this guy in front of him was quite good at dressing up. The curly-bearded man was already a person that people didn't dare to approach. Now that he wore a pair of sunglasses, it added a bit of a baleful aura. It was really daunting. However, that was to others. In Lin Yi's eyes, this guy was similar to Zihua in the secular world. He was purely a gangster. Chapter 4590. Oh, your eyesight is not bad. You know that I want to rob you. Then what are you talking about? Hurry up and take out all the good stuff. The curly-bearded man immediately laughed, and then added, Don't play tricks on me. Those who ventured out of the South Continent must have good stuff in their hands. If you hand it over consciously, I can spare your life. If you play tricks on me, then I can only let you feed the sea beasts. You don't look like a fool. I hope you are a smart person. I believe I am a smart person, but it's hard to say whether you are. Robbery? Hee, this is really not a big deal in the South Continent Sea. But do you know what happened to those guys who robbed me last time? Lenny was still sitting on the back of the spirit bird, and said with a playful smile. What happened? The curly-bearded man was not in a hurry to make a move. He also put on an expression like a cat playing with a mouse. He squinted at Lin Yi, and seemed to be calculating how many benefits he could get this time. 3 were thrown into the sea to feed the beasts, and the last one is locked up. We don't know if he's alive or not, but I don't think you'll be that lucky. There's still the sea all around us. And it'd be easier to just feed the beasts. It'd be a perfect ending, don't you think? Lenny said seriously. TSK, you are really arrogant. You want to throw me into the sea to feed the sea beasts? Ha ha ha. The curly-bearded man suddenly laughed uncontrollably, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He was out of breath for a long time and could not stop. Lenny glanced at him, and suddenly ordered the spirit bird under him. It seems that he is a psychopath. He is so pitiful. God is kind to all living things. Let's go. After that, the man and the bird really left. The curly-bearded man who was still laughing almost fainted. Just now, Lenny looked at him as if he was looking at a fool. This kid actually dared to treat him as an idiot. With a scream, the ghost-eyed golden eagle, who was left behind, caught up in an instant. With lightning speed, it blocked in front of Lin Yi and the spirit bird. The corner of the curly-bearded man's mouth twitched. He stared coldly at Lin Yi and said, You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, right? Okay, you have guts. Today, I really don't want any treasure from you. Just because of what you said just now, you must die today. After that, the curly-bearded man's aura suddenly skyrocketed. A domineering aura pressed on Lin Yi and the spirit bird without reservation. The spirit bird's body was unstable, and almost fell into the sea. Even Lin Yi's was shocked. This guy turned out to be a master. Although it seemed that he was only at the early stage of the mysterious ascension realm, experts of this level would have a foothold no matter where they went. Even the most powerful sects would treat them as distinguished guests. Not to mention being an elder in power, no matter how bad it was, he could at least be a guest. If he was in the 3 pavilions of the North Island, he would already have the opportunity to enter the Elders' Council. To be honest, Lenny had never thought that such an existence would come out to be a robber. The things in this world were really strange. There were all kinds of people. A master in the early stage of profound ascension couldn't make money, but he had to come out to be a robber. Looking at Lin Yi's incredulous eyes, the curly-bearded man suddenly laughed proudly again. He liked this kind of look the most, so every time he looked for someone to make a move, he would not show his cultivation at the early stage of profound ascension. Only when it was almost time to make a move would he show his sharpness. This was the feeling of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Scared? Ha 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 ha, unfortunately it's too late. If you had taken the initiative to hand over the treasure just now, I might have let you live. But now, since I said that you must die, there is no second possibility. Don't you understand? The curly-bearded man laughed wildly without any scruples. Do I have the power? Lenny couldn't help but grin. Seeing that the guy was still looking at him like he was an idiot, he frowned slightly and said, "Are you really an idiot? If you really have the power, then I would have died the moment you said the word die. How could I still be alive now? I say, how did you get your strength at the early stage of profound ascension? Don't you need IQ to cultivate these days?" After hearing this, the curly-bearded man's face turned red. Even though he was wearing sunglasses, it could be seen that he was just boasting about himself. He was only at the early stage of the profound ascension realm, and he was still at least 108,000 miles away from the real verbally enforcing law. You have a sharp tongue. Good, very good, I've changed my mind now. I've decided not to throw you into the sea to feed the sea beasts. I'm going to cripple you, then hang you up with a rope and drag you into the sea to fish for sea beasts. What do you think of this idea? The curly-bearded man said angrily, "It's not bad, but I think the sea beasts might not like to eat my meat. They definitely prefer to eat someone with a stronger smell of blood. It seems that you are more suitable." Linny smiled faintly. "Ait." The curly-bearded man flew into a rage. He was choked for a long time and couldn't say a word. Only now did he finally realize one thing. If they really wanted to bicker, even if there were 10 of him, he wouldn't be a match for this sharp-tongued kid. How about it? You also think it makes sense, right? Lenny crossed his arms and looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. If it was before, he probably wouldn't be in the mood to talk nonsense with a robber, even if the other party was an early-stage profound ascension master. But now he was in a good mood, and this was the first time he saw a living person in more than half a year. So he unconsciously wanted to play with him. Being looked at by Lenny like this, the curly-bearded man's anger soared to the heavens. He immediately lost the thought of a cat playing with a mouse, and immediately said with a murderous look, "I've seen many people who don't know life from death, but it's the first time I've seen someone as reckless as you. Kid, let me give you a word of advice. It's useless to just talk. It will only make your death more miserable. Remember this in your next life." After saying that, the curly-bearded man no longer gave Lin Yi a chance to speak. He suddenly pulled out a pitch-black long rod from behind him, and along with a roar, he smashed the rod down towards Lin Yi's head from afar. His rod was 12 feet long, and the distance between the two parties was at least more than 10 feet. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be able to reach Lin Yi, but when the rod fell, it turned into a large and fierce shadow of the rod that blotted out the sky and earth. The terrible murderous aura that was revealed was enough to change the color of the sky. Chapter 4591. Accompanied by the horrifying whistling of the wind, mixed with the shadows of the rod, it was like a group of terrifying demons that chose to devour people. At this moment, Lin Yi and the spirit bird were shrouded by the shadows of the staff. They were like a small boat in a raging storm, swaying in the wind and rain, as if they could be destroyed at any time. If they were even grazed by the shadow of the staff, they would be doomed immediately. As expected of a master in the early stage of the profound ascension realm, he is really not simple. Lenny saw this and smiled calmly. Not only was he not nervous, but he suddenly became a little excited. His eyes were extraordinary, and his fighting spirit was surging. In the face of the overwhelming rod shadow, Lin Yi's eyes were filled with killing intent. His right hand suddenly arched into the shape of a dragon's claw. Each of his fingertips gushed out a single color of qi. 5 qi quickly gathered in his palm, accompanied by a dragon's roar. The 5 elements of killing intent rose against the sky. Haha, I thought you had a lot of confidence. It turns out that you are just a weakling in the early stage of the nascent soul stage. A mere firefly dares to compete with the sun and the moon? The bearded man saw this and suddenly laughed. Before, when Lin Yi hit his strength, he was more or less uncertain. But now that he saw the details of Lin Yi, he suddenly had no more scruples. The strength of the early stage of the nascent soul stage could not be considered weak, but it also depended on who he was compared with. In a small place, he was naturally a master who could dominate a small area, but in front of a profound ascension realm cultivator, he was at most a fart. The difference between them was almost a whole realm. Such a disparity in strength had already determined the outcome. What made him feel even more ridiculous was that his opponent clearly knew that there was a huge disparity in strength, but he still didn't think of taking the opportunity to escape. Instead, he stubbornly braced himself and fought him head-on. His brain was simply too stupid to be saved. The bearded man couldn't help but laugh wildly when he saw this. People with sharp tongues generally did not have great wisdom. These words were really not false. Of course, in his opinion, even if the other party chose to escape, he was stupid. His ghost-eyed golden eagle's speed was far above the other party's trash spirit bird. How could he escape? Die in peace, 10,000 rod shattering. The curly-bearded man let out an explosive roar that shook the heavens. In an instant, the black rod shadows that had blotted out the sky and covered the earth converged into one, transforming into a solid killing heaven rod that smashed down. Every rod shadow had the power of 1,000 pounds, and this killing heaven rod that had condensed countless rod shadows, its power was more than 10 million pounds. Oh, keep that to yourself. Lin Yi smiled slightly. Although he was enveloped by the 10,000 rod smash, his expression remained unchanged. Although his opponent's martial technique was powerful, he did not believe that the 5 elements killing chi he had comprehended from the 5 poison flood dragon would lose. As he spoke, the heaven-defying 5 elements killing intent had already transformed into a flood dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It met the opponent's heaven-reaching staff head-on. In an instant, the surrounding area of 1,000 miles was filled with ghostly wails and wolf howls, and the weather changed color. You think you can block my 10,000 cudgel smash just by creating a dragon? What a joke! The curly-bearded man was about to use this last opportunity to ridicule him. However, before he finished speaking, the scene in front of him made his expression freeze. It was very different from what he expected. The dragon formed by the killing intent of the 5 elements was not smashed by the rod. Instead, before the power of the sky-shattering rod was raised to the extreme, it actually followed the rod dragon coiling pillar. And an even more exaggerated scene was yet to come. After the killing intent of the 5 elements entangled the sky-shattering rod, the 5-colored divine light on its body flowed rapidly. The insufferably arrogant sky-shattering rod actually fell apart in the blink of an eye. It was crushed by it. The bearded man was so scared that his tongue was hanging out. Sky-shattering rod was a powerful martial skill of his. Just now, because he attacked in anger, he did not hold back at all, nor did he underestimate the enemy. A profound ascending early stage used all his strength to deal with a mere peak early nascent soul stage. How could this be the result? Even if you beat him to death, he could not figure out why this was happening. In fact, he was indeed going to die. After the 5 elements killing chi crushed the Tong Tian terminus rod, it did not dissipate into thin air. Instead, it directly found him the main master. The curly-bearded man, and the ghost-eyed golden eagle under him, could be said to be unprepared for this. Without any suspense, they were both penetrated by the 5 elements killing chi, leaving a huge bloody hole in their chests. The killing intent of the 5 elements is indeed a rare and terrifying martial skill. This time I've really earned a lot. Watching the bearded man and the ghost-eyed golden eagle fall straight into the sea, Lin Yi couldn't help but be shocked. He did expect that the killing intent of the 5 elements could fight against a profound ascending stage master. But he never thought that it would be so easy, killing them on the spot. Lin Yi and the spirit bird stayed in the air for a while. After all, the other party was a profound ascending stage master. Although the bloody hole in his chest was a bit scary, with his strong vitality, as long as he could get timely treatment, there was still a chance for him to survive. Okay, let's go. A profound ascending stage master came out to rob us, why bother? Lenny shook his head when he saw the bearded man and the ghost-eyed golden eagle fall into the sea together. There was no need to continue watching, because the other party was definitely dead. As expected, at the same time Lin Yi and the spirit bird left, the curly-bearded man and the golden-eyed eagle were immediately surrounded by a few sea beasts that followed the smell of blood. In the blink of an eye, they were completely devoured. This time they really couldn't be more dead. Continuing to fly in the direction of the North Island, they would pass by the Middle Island on the way. If there were no accidents, they would arrive soon. Lenny wanted to go to the Middle Island to take a look. After all, the Middle Island had the will of heaven, Kaizhongyang, and Ho Guanxi, especially the two confidants, Tian Chan and Sydney. After so long, Lenny missed them very much. However, after thinking about it carefully, Lenny finally gave up the tempting idea of turning to the Middle Island. Unless he got the permission of the Middle Island Master Pavilion, flying spirit beasts could not fly over the Middle Island without authorization. If Lenny wanted to enter the Middle Island, he would have to spend a lot of effort. What's more, he had been away from the North Island for too long, far beyond the deadline of the mission, and he couldn't send back a message on the way. Normal people would think that something had happened to him. He didn't know what happened to his little brothers, and there was also the King of Rags. All of this made Lenny quite worried. He could only let go of the idea of Middle Island first. Anyway, the two women, Tian Chan and Sydney, were taken care of by the will of heaven and others. Nothing would happen to them. He could find a chance to see them in the future. Chapter 4592. After making up his mind, Lenny became more and more eager to return, and the speed of the spirit bird unconsciously increased little by little. It was really scared by the ghost-eyed golden eagle just now. If it weren't for Lin Yi's powerful strength that killed the eagle, it and Lenny would be the food of the sea beast at the moment. After all, with the speed of the eagle, it could easily catch up with it. So the spirit bird's only thought at this time was to fly faster and faster. Only when it was so fast that all the flying spirit beasts couldn't catch up with it, then it would be really safe. North Island 3 pavilions. Since the emergence of the newcomer king, Ma Daiqiang, especially after he stood out among the heroes in the inner door competition, the 3 pavilions had been talking about this time. Almost everyone was talking about this unprecedented newcomer in the nascent soul stage. Due to the emergence of Lin Yi and Ma Daiqiang, the 2 newcomer kings, even the Clear Cloud Pavilion, that had always been on the decline, suddenly regained its former glory, looking like a salted fish that had turned over a new leaf. However, unexpectedly, the person in the limelight recently was not Ma Daiqiang of Blue Cloud Pavilion, but the young master of Soaring Sky Pavilion, Su Lingchong, who had been silent for a long time. Since the last time he disappeared, this young master Su had changed from his usual arrogant and domineering attitude, becoming much more calm and reserved. This time, the reason why he became the focus of the conversation was not because he had done something eye-catching, but because he had succeeded in becoming the eldest senior brother of the outer court steward of Soaring Sky Pavilion. Of course, this news itself was not very eye-catching, and it couldn't even be regarded as news. After all, Su Lingchong had been competing for this position for a long time, and he had made various preparations for this. It could be said that everyone knew his intentions. However, this time it still caused a great sensation, because Su Lingchong broke through to the master of the nascent soul stage. When Su Lingchong first started to build momentum for this, his strength was only at the peak of the foundation establishment stage. In less than a year, he actually crossed the entire gold core stage and became a master of the nascent soul stage. This kind of thing was simply shocking. Young Master Su's talent had been outstanding since he was young, and this had long been publicized to the world by those who were observant. But even so, it had never been boasted to such a shocking extent. Not to mention that others did not believe it. In fact, even Su Yuanzheng, his own grandfather, felt dazed, and often could not help but wonder if he was dreaming. From the peak of the foundation establishment stage to the nascent soul stage, if it was a cultivator with average talent, they might not be able to succeed, even after spending 100 years. Even those so-called elites would need at least 8 to 10 years. If someone said that he wanted to cross the entire gold core stage within a year, he would definitely be regarded as a madman. However, the ironclad truth was right in front of them. Even if they didn't want to believe it, they had to believe it. After a moment of disbelief, they could only use one sentence to express their feelings. Extraordinary people do extraordinary things. Young Master Su was no ordinary genius, so there was nothing to be surprised about even if he didn't take the ordinary path. With the strength of the nascent soul stage, even if Su Lingcheng's deep background was not taken into account, it was still a humbling position. There was nothing to be surprised about. But apart from Su Lingcheng's sudden advancement to the nascent soul stage, there was another thing that shocked everyone. Ma Dongxiang, the newcomer king of Blue Cloud Pavilion, who was also a nascent soul stage expert, was in front of young Master Su Lingcheng. He actually considered himself as a little brother. This scene was really shocking. Although Su Lingcheng was also a nascent soul stage expert, this Ma Dongxiang was not weaker than him in terms of strength. In fact, he was even in the limelight recently. Speaking of status and position, Chen Xiaobei was not the only one. Ma Dongxiang was now the second senior brother of Blue Cloud Pavilion's inner sect steward. Even if Blue Cloud Pavilion was not as good as Soaring Sky Pavilion, the second senior brother of inner sect steward's position should be much stronger than the eldest senior brother of outer sect steward, right? After thinking about it, there was only one explanation. That was, Ma Dongxiang had taken a fancy to young Master Su's deep background. The other party had a grandfather, who was a big shot in the Elder Council. This was the only place that Ma Dongxiang could climb up to. However, this explanation was still very far-fetched. Don't forget that Ma Dongxiang was often compared to Lin Yi, and he himself seemed to attach great importance to it. Every single thing, even if it was a small matter, he was determined to not be inferior to Lin Yi. But Lin Yi had never lowered his head to young Master Su before. On the contrary, it was young Master Su who repeatedly met with a rebuff. Why was Ma Dongxiang now willing to be young Master Su's little brother? If Ma Dongxiang only lowered his head to Su Lingcheng, even if the reason was a little far-fetched, everyone would feel that it was no big deal in the end. After all, everyone had their own ambitions. Back then, Lin Yi and Su Lingcheng didn't get along well. Maybe this Ma Dongxiang would hit it off with young Master Su. This wasn't impossible. But the problem was that Ma Dongxiang not only bowed and groveled in front of Su Lingcheng, the young master of Soaring Sky Pavilion, but even in front of Meng Tong, Kong Mingming, and Zhong Pingliang, he had to flatter them from time to time. It seemed that he was clearly ranked at the bottom of the group. This was really incomprehensible. No matter what, he was a nascent soul stage master. If it was said that in order to curry favor with young Master Su, he even had to flatter Meng Tong and the others. Wasn't that too much of a bootlicker? Wasn't that too lacking in the dignity of a master? And what was unexpected was that Ma Dongxiang, who had always been very sensitive to the discussions in the streets, turned a deaf ear to everyone's one-sided negative comments this time. It gave people the feeling that he was prepared to go down the dark path, and was determined to flatter Su Lingcheng and his group to the end. On this day, Su Lingcheng's group had once again gathered together. The bystanders were already used to this kind of scene. These people would gather once every 10 days. This group of people would mysteriously shut themselves up in a small house. No one knew what they were secretly discussing. In any case, everyone would keep their mouths shut when they came out of the small house. They would never announce to the bystanders what they were going to do, appearing to be unfathomable. Walking out of Su Lingcheng's mansion, Ma Dongxiang nodded and groveled as he watched Kong Mingming and the others leave. Only then did he return to Blue Cloud Pavilion alone. Although he was not the only Blue Cloud Pavilion disciple in the group, Meng Tong had always been inseparable from Su Lingcheng. They ate and lived together. Naturally, he wouldn't go to Blue Cloud Pavilion if there wasn't anything important. Returning to Blue Cloud Pavilion, Ma Dongxiang, who was previously bowing and groveling, immediately became arrogant. No matter who he met, He had a gloomy expression that made the group of Blue Cloud Pavilion disciples only dare to look at him from afar. Only when he was far away could they continue doing what they were supposed to do. Chapter 4593. Just as Ma Daoqiang was about to return to his residence number 1, he suddenly saw a familiar figure at the corner. He was stunned for a moment before he reacted and shouted at the figure, "Hey, the idiot called Lu Bianren in front, stop right there." Lu Bianren was stunned. He had already seen this arrogant and despotic Ma Daoqiang, but he didn't want to get into trouble, so he deliberately avoided him. He didn't expect that he would still be stopped by this guy. Although Huang Xiaolong had the intention to ignore him, he didn't want to appear weak in front of this bastard. Not to mention, the other party had used such a humiliating method to call out his name in front of so many Clear Cloud Pavilion disciples. It was not right for him to run away like a turtle hiding in its shell. Turning around, Lu Bianren calmly looked at Ma Daoqiang. His face was as calm as an ancient well, without the slightest hint of joy or anger. Even the bystanders who had nothing to do with this couldn't help but sigh. This Lu Bianren was indeed a well-mannered gentleman. However, Ma Daoqiang saw Lu Bianren's performance as a coward. He curled his lips in disdain and said, "Where's that bullshit Lin Yi? Did he come back? If he came back, tell him to come see me quickly." No. Lu Bianren's tone was still calm. He knew that with his strength, he would only be at a disadvantage if he fought with Ma Daoqiang. Since he knew that he couldn't afford to provoke him, he shouldn't let his anger blind his mind. Otherwise, it would only ruin things. No. Damn it, why hasn't he come back? How long has he been gone? Why hasn't he come back? Ma Daoqiang frowned and said in a sarcastic tone, "Oh, could it be that he knows that I'm going to find trouble with him? And he also knows that he's not strong enough? He's afraid of dying in my hands, so he's a coward and doesn't dare to come back? Ha 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 ha." Lu Bianren's expression changed slightly. It didn't matter how Ma Daoqiang ridiculed him. He could completely ignore it. However, he couldn't remain indifferent when Ma Daoqiang made fun of Lin Yi so unscrupulously in front of him. After all, Lin Yi wasn't only his friend, he also saved his life. Furthermore, she had saved his life. If he ignored her at this time, it would be unjust. He, Lu Bianren, could tolerate anything, but he could not tolerate inhumane and unjust things. Junior brother Lin is a publicly acknowledged genius disciple. Even the Soaring Sky Pavilion's Pavilion Master Shangguan is full of praise for him. Before you defeat him face to face, I advise you to think before you speak. Otherwise, you will not only be insulting junior brother Lin, but also Pavilion Master Shangguan. Lu Bianren's complexion sank. Oh, from the looks of it, his reverse scale had been stepped on. TSK, I thought a coward like you would never be able to stand up for his entire life. Ma Dafeng immediately became even more spirited. In a flash, he suddenly appeared in front of Lu Bianren and grabbed him by the neck. "You said I insulted Pavilion Master Shangguan? Alright, then why don't you tell me how I insulted him? Insulting him for having poor judgment and mistaking a good-for-nothing for a genius? It would be fine if no one mentioned the matter of Shanghai Tianhua. But once someone brought it up, Ma Daoguang would definitely explode in anger, as if his scars had been exposed in front of him. He was also the radiant newcomer king of the inner sanctum. Shanghai Tianhua only thinks highly of that bullshit Lin Yi. But he disdains me, a new nascent soul stage cultivator, who is stronger than him. This old man's brain must be flooded with water. Ma Daoqiang was already in a bad mood today, which was why he specifically called out to Lu Bianren. Actually, he just wanted to find fault with Lu Bianren to vent his anger. Now that Lu Bianren had poked at his scars, it would be strange if he didn't fly into a rage on the spot. Don't be fooled by the fact that his strength was superb, and he seemed to be in the limelight recently. Actually, the situation of using a horse as a spear wasn't as glorious as what others imagined. Especially in front of Su Lingchong's group, it was called vexing and sullen. As the weakest person in the group, Yi Shiwen's expression changed drastically. Not only Su Lingchong, but also anyone else, he didn't dare to disobey, so he could only do as he was told. Especially this time, Su Lingchong had assigned him an extremely fucked up mission. He had already accumulated a bellyful of anger, and coincidentally bumped into Lu Bianren at this time. He was simply a ready-made punching bag. Of course, although Ma Daoqiang seemed to act perverse, this time, in addition to finding fault with Lu Bianren to vent his anger, he actually had another important purpose, which was to complete the task that Su Lingchong had just assigned to him. Every disciple had to do a trial task regularly after entering the inner sanctum. This time, Su Lingchong's order to Ma Daoqiang was to take a trial task near the South Island, and take this opportunity to inquire about the whereabouts of Lin Yi. When he received this order just now, Ma Daoqiang almost went crazy, but he tried hard not to lose his temper on the spot. Damn it! I gave up the super newcomer king, and went all the way to the South Island to do a task? Isn't there something wrong with his brain? It was a pity that Ma Daoqiang was the super newcomer king surrounded by many stars in Blue Cloud Pavilion, but in front of Su Lingchong and his gang, he was not even a fart. Not to mention losing his temper on the spot. Even if he just muttered behind his back, once it was known by others, he would die without a burial place immediately. Even if he had 100 guts, he would not dare to take this risk. Just to inquire about the whereabouts of Lin Yi, who had no idea whether he was dead or alive, he had to go all the way to the South Island to do a task in person. No one would be in a good mood for this kind of fucking thing, and they would curse no matter who it was. Su Lingchong also knew that this was a bit too much, but he had no choice. Lin Yi had been too quiet these days, and even the mysterious man could not know his whereabouts. Therefore, this matter fell on Su Lingchong's head. Obviously, Su Lingchong would not bear this crime himself. Ma Daoqiang, who had just become the super newcomer king, was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate for the task. With a stomach full of anger that had nowhere to vent, Ma Daoqiang held Lu Bianren's neck with one hand. If there were not so many disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion pointing and whispering around, he even wanted to strangle Lu Bianren on the spot to vent his anger. Being held in the air by Ma Daoqiang with one hand by the neck, Lu Bianren was in a very embarrassing state at the moment. Because he was out of breath, his face had turned the color of a pig's liver. He struggled desperately, but he could not get rid of Ma Daoqiang's hand at all. He only felt that Ma Daoqiang's hand was as hard as iron. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not move at all. There was no other way. The gap between their strength was too wide, and Lu Bianren was caught off guard by Ma Daoqiang. Unless Ma Daoqiang took the initiative to let go. Otherwise, if this stalemate continued, Lu Bianren would definitely suffocate to death even if his throat was not crushed. Judging from Ma Daoqiang's posture, Lu Bianren did not intend to let go at all. Chapter 4594. If he really killed Lu Bianren in public, it would definitely cause a great uproar. As the super newcomer king, Ma Daoqiang would have to pay a big price. However, he was so angry at this moment that how could he let Lu Bianren go so easily? Ma Daoqiang's idea was that he had to go to the South Island anyway, so it didn't matter if he killed Lu Bianren. He would just take it as going out to avoid the trouble. Say it. Why don't you dare to say it? Or do you also think that Pavilion Master Shengguan has eyes but fails to see, and that his old eyes were blind to pick a useless person? Ma Daoqiang choked Lu Bianren so hard that he even spat out his tongue. He knew that Ma Daoqiang couldn't say anything, but he felt a rare pleasure. He couldn't hold back his anger, so he had to vent it out. The disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion watched this scene from afar, and they couldn't help sweating for Lu Bianren, but no one dared to stand up. Lu Bianren had always been a good person, and they didn't mind helping him a little. But now they were facing a freak like Ma Daoqiang, who couldn't be judged by common sense. It was better to stay as far away from him as possible, so as not to get into trouble. Lu Bianren's heart was filled with grief, being strangled to death in the Clear Cloud Pavilion, under the watchful eyes of so many people. And from the beginning to the end, not a single person dared to step forward to stop it. The hypocrisy and coldness of the world, to such an extent, really made him feel a chill in his heart, and all his hopes turned to dust. However, at this moment, a young girl's voice suddenly sounded. Who dares to say that my grandfather has eyes but cannot see? Along with the voice, a chubby, tall, scholarly, and cute little bear appeared in front of everyone, followed by its owner Shanghai Laner. "Greetings, Miss Shangguan." The group of Clear Cloud Pavilion disciples who were watching from the side were shocked, quickly cupping their fists in greeting. Although this young lady was the Soaring Sky Pavilion's little princess, even the Clear Cloud Pavilion's pavilion lord, Yu Jinyang, had to be courteous to her, not to mention ordinary disciples like them. Seeing Shangguan Laner suddenly appear, the arrogant, despotic, and condescending Ma Daiqiang couldn't help but be startled. Don't be fooled by him saying that Shangguan Tianhua had eyes but couldn't see, as if he didn't place the Soaring Sky Pavilion master in his eyes at all. However, if these words were to reach the ears of the person in question, he would definitely be scared to the point of wetting his pants. The super rookie king of the nascent soul stage. Don't look at this gimmick that sounds really badass. But in front of Shangguan Tianhua, he was not even an ant. He didn't even need to move a finger. As long as he opened his golden mouth and called his name once, he wouldn't be able to survive the next day. He was well aware of this. Seeing that Shangguan Laner was looking at him with a cold expression, Ma Daoqiang's heart suddenly thumped. He had said those words purely because he was angry. Of course, if it was only heard by the disciples of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, it was impossible for these words to reach Shanghai Tianhua's ears. However, the problem was that these words were heard by Shangguan Laner. She was the granddaughter of Shangguan Tianhua. If she went back and spread these words, what would Shangguan Tianhua's reaction be? Thinking of this, Ma Daoqiang suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He couldn't wait to slap his own mouth. This time, disaster really came from a loose tongue, who told him to forget to guard his mouth in a moment of happiness. For the second time, who said that my grandfather had eyes but failed to see. Quickly stand up for this young lady. I won't repeat the same words a third time. At that time, the one who will question you won't be me, but your pavilion lord Yu. Shangguan Laner continued to speak with a cold expression. Shangguan Tianhua was her only relative. She absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to disrespect her grandfather, not to mention slandering him in public. Everyone's eyes were focused on Ma Daoqiang. Ma Daoqiang's face suddenly turned blue and purple. He was almost as angry as Lu Bianren at the moment. Seeing Shangguan Laner staring at him with a murderous look, Ma Daoqiang knew that he couldn't avoid it. Ma Daiqiang knew that he couldn't avoid it, so he had to bite the bullet, and said with an apologetic smile, "Miss Shangguan, you may have misheard. Cabinet Master Shangguan is wise and brilliant, and that's something that everyone in the North Island is talking about. Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall is a ready-made example. Who would say that Cabinet Master Shangguan is blind? Isn't that lying with his eyes open? Unless his brain was kicked by a donkey." "Is that so?" Shangguan Laner glanced at him, then turned to the crowd and said, "Did he say that just now? Why doesn't it sound like it?" Seeing this, the disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion looked at Ma Daoqiang hesitantly. Seeing that this guy was staring at them fiercely and threatening them with the gesture of slitting his neck, they immediately shrank their necks and shook their heads weakly, saying, I didn't hear it clearly." Although they were afraid of Shangguan Laner, they were more afraid of Ma Daoqiang. After all, no matter how distinguished Shanghai Laner's status was, she was still a member of Rising Sky Pavilion. She wouldn't have anything to do with them. However, Ma Daoqiang was the second senior brother of Inner Core Supervisor of Blue Cloud Pavilion. If they dared to tell the truth at this time, even if Ma Daoqiang was unlucky, he would definitely take revenge on them before he was unlucky. They couldn't afford to take such a big risk. Didn't hear it clearly? There are so many of you. Didn't any of you hear it clearly? Looking at the disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion cowering in fear, Shanghai Laner suddenly became angry. Then she rolled her eyes and suddenly pointed at Lu Bianren, saying, "You are the closest to this guy, you speak." At this moment, Lu Bianren was still being held in Ma Daoqiang's hand. At this time, he was on the verge of fainting and couldn't move at all. When Ma Daoqiang heard Shanghai Laner's words, he immediately tightened his grip. He was afraid that Lu Bianren would say something unfavorable to him, so he immediately wanted to silence him. At the same time, it was also a bloody warning to everyone present. Why haven't you put him down yet? I will say the ugly words first. If he does anything wrong, you will silence him, Shanghai Laner said with a cold face. At the same time, the little curly bear under her feet had already rushed over and climbed onto Ma Daoqiang's body. After that, the little curly bear bit down on Lu Bianren's hand. Ah! Ma Daoqiang cried out in pain. Under the pain, he loosened his grip and threw Lu Bianren to the side. Although the little curly bear's strength wasn't high, it seemed like a cute pet. However, this was only a deceptive appearance. The powerful destructive power of the curly bear clan was definitely first class among all the spiritual beasts. Although the little curly bear was far from being mature, it was born with a pair of good teeth. It could even chew spiritual jades into pieces. Although Ma Daoqiang was an original infant stage expert, he was still made of flesh and blood. Of course, he couldn't withstand the little curly bear's bite. With this, Lu Bianren, who had been suffocating for a long time, was finally able to escape from death. His body was in a sorry state as he lay on the side, gasping for breath. Chapter 4595. Seeing this, Ma Dongqiang immediately gnashed his teeth in hatred. He subconsciously wanted to kill this annoying little curly bear. But the next moment he reacted and quickly withdrew his hand. This was Shangguan Laner's flesh and blood. Not to mention killing the little curly bear. Even if Ma Dongqiang was only able to hurt half a hair of the little curly bear, he would not rest until he was dead. He really could not afford to provoke him. Being stared at by Shangguan Laner, Ma Dongqiang could only stand at the side and watch hatefully. Previously, when Lu Bianren was pinched in his hand, he still had a chance to quietly kill him. But now, it was definitely impossible. Damn it, this coward escaped from this calamity. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Lu Bianren panted for a long time, without caring about his image. His breath barely returned to normal. He slowly stood up and tidied up his messy clothes. He bowed deeply to Shangguan Lan, and said, "Thank you for saving my life, Miss Shangguan. I will never forget it." "It was nothing. You don't need to take it to heart. Let's talk about what happened just now. Did this guy say that my grandfather has eyes but cannot see?" Shangguan Laner faintly smiled. Although she was very close to Lin Yi, she had never had any dealings with Lu Bianren. She had only seen him from afar a few times. This time, she happened to encounter this matter, which could be considered as Lu Bianren's good fortune. Otherwise, it would be hard to predict whether he would live or die today. Hearing this, Lu Bianren looked at Ma Dongqiang, who had a fierce expression on his face, and then looked at the surrounding disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion, who did not dare to make a sound. At this moment, Lu Bianren's heart was filled with disappointment. The disciples of the sect were all cowardly trash. They did not even have the bearing of an ordinary person. Who could be blamed for Blue Cloud Pavilion falling into such an embarrassing situation today? I'm warning you, don't speak nonsense. Otherwise, I will look for you and have a heart-to-heart talk. Ma Dongqiang threatened indifferently. If he said he would do it, if Lu Bianren really dared to testify against him, he would not mind taking another life tonight. Facing such an undisguised threat, Lu Bianren looked at him calmly, and did not have the slightest intention of backing down. He slowly said, replying to Miss Shangguan, "Yes." "You." Ma Dongqiang was so angry that he could not help but want to attack again. He had seen many cowards with no strength, but someone like Lu Bianren who was not afraid of death, this was the first time he had seen. "Good, very good. This is the first time in my life that I've heard someone say that my grandfather has eyes, but cannot see. You've really opened my eyes." These words really need to be heard by the old man himself. This time she was really angry. She coldly snorted and stared at Ma Dun like a spear and said, "Speak. What's your name?" "No, it's not like that. Miss Shangguan, please listen to my explanation. This guy is holding a grudge, and speaking without thinking. Pavilion Master Shangguan has always been the person I respect the most. Why would I speak ill of him behind his back? My sincerity can be witnessed by the sun and the moon. Miss Shangguan, you must not be deceived by this vile person." Ma Dafeng quickly pretended to be greatly wronged. "His name is Ma Daoqiang," Lu Bianren said indifferently. "Horse's spear. Shangguan Laner thought for a long time, but could not remember what this plaything was. Ever since Linny left, she rarely came out to play. Basically, she only heard some news from the outside world from Shanghai Tianhua. Ma Daoqiang, this so-called super newcomer king, she really had never heard of him. Ma Daoqiang originally wanted to defend himself, but when he saw Shanghai Laner's confused expression, his self-esteem immediately suffered a heavy blow. His pride took a heavy blow. It was one thing for Shangguan Tianhua to look down on him, the rookie king, but now even Shangguan Laner looked at him with disdain, as if she had just heard a nameless nobody. This was too much. This could not be tolerated. The biggest blow to those who thought they were infallible was not to belittle them, nor was it to insult them, but to ignore them. He was once just an unknown nobody. From the day he soared to the sky and became a nascent soul stage expert, Ma Daoqiang vowed to let everyone know his name. And Shanghai Tianhua and Shanghai Laner, this pair of grandfather and granddaughter, unknowingly broke his heart into pieces. Yes, I am Ma Daoqiang. If Miss Shangguan is not too ignorant and inexperienced, you should know that recently, Blue Cloud Pavilion has a nascent soul stage super newcomer king. Ma Daoqiang suddenly changed his mind. He changed from his previous flattering smile to flatter Shanghai Laner to an overbearing manner. I have never heard of him. Shanghai Laner carefully looked at him and finally told the truth. When Ma Daoqiang heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched again. He suppressed his anger and said, "Well then Miss Shangguan has heard of it now, right? I might as well tell you the truth. Pavilion Master Shangguan has eyes but cannot see. These words were indeed said by me. Not only did I say so, but I also want to prove this point. I want all of you to see who is the real super genius between me and that bullshit Lin Yi. You want to compete with junior brother Lin?" Shanghai Laner couldn't help but reveal a look of disbelief. In her mind, Lin Yi was an invincible existence among the disciples of the three pavilions. At that time, Shanghai Tianhua's attitude was a clear proof. She didn't expect to meet someone who refused to admit defeat today. No wonder this guy dared to say that her grandfather had eyes but could not see. How do you want to prove it? Lu Bianren grasped the main point of the other party's words. Ma Daoqiang suddenly said these words, indicating that he must have a plan. It's very simple. Don't you think I can't compare with that bullshit Lin Yi? Well, then I'll find a trial mission to go to the South Island and personally cripple him and bring him back. Let's see what you have to say then. After saying that, Ma Daoqiang immediately left with a cold snort. He was taking advantage of the situation. Anyway, since Su Lingqiong had assigned him the task, he must go to the South Island to find Lin Yi. If he did not find a suitable reason to run errands for no reason, he would definitely be looked down upon by others, and even be suspected by people with ulterior motives. Now he happened to encounter such a situation where he could not back down, so he could kill two birds with one stone by saying in public. Not only did he have a good reason to go to the South Island, but he could also explain to Shanghai Tianhua. At least before the result of the battle between Ma Daoqiang and Lin Yi came out, the pavilion master of Rising Sky Pavilion couldn't blame him. Otherwise, it would be a performance of guilt, and then he would be known as a person who had eyes but could not see. If he successfully disabled Lin Yi, then Shanghai Tianhua couldn't do anything to him. This response was simply perfect. If he hadn't been watched by so many people, Ma Daoqiang couldn't help but applaud for his quick wit. It was so fucking witty. Looking at Ma Daoqiang's arrogant back, Shanghai Laner stuck out her tongue in disdain, but Lu Bianren was worried. If Lin Yi was really met by this guy, it would bode ill rather than well. After all, the opponent was a master in the nascent soul stage. Chapter 4596. Others didn't know, but when Lu Bianren and Lin Yi parted ways in Devil Lung City, he was very clear that Lin Yi was only an expert in the middle stage of Gold Core. Although he was already incredibly strong compared to the disciples of the other three pavilions, he was still a lot weaker than Ma Daoqiang, the new king of the nascent soul stage. It was normal for people like Lin Yi to fight an opponent of a higher level, but it was still impossible for him to fight an opponent of a higher level. If you have read this chapter, please move to / or directly search for, or, on Baidu. Please remember our new website address. Ah, I've been fooled by this guy, he's really cunning. Shanghai Laner was stunned for a moment, and suddenly said angrily, Ma Daoqiang, this bastard, dared to slander her grandfather in public. She had planned to make this guy pay a good price just now, but he only said a few words, and then walked away unscathed. It was really infuriating. Miss Shangguan, Ma Daoqiang looks arrogant and domineering, but he is actually not a stupid person. What's more, after what he said, even if it's for the sake of Pavilion Master Shangguan's reputation, you can't deal with him. Lu Bianren sighed at the side. I know, that's why I said he's cunning, and let him escape. Otherwise, I would have caught him and severely punished him. Shanghai Laner shrugged helplessly and said angrily, this was Lin Yi's habitual action, and she had unknowingly learned it since she got close to Lin Yi. Lu Bianren smiled and did not speak. He was almost strangled to death by Ma Daoqiang just now. If there was anyone present who hated Ma Daoqiang the most, it would definitely be him. But at this moment, he acted as if nothing had happened. Since he couldn't do anything to him for the time being, it was useless to be angry. It was better to put the hatred behind him first. A gentleman's revenge was never too late. By the way, do you have any news about Junior Brother? Shanghai Laner stomped her feet angrily for a while, and then suddenly changed the topic. The reason why she came here today was to ask about this matter. Lin Yi had been gone for more than a year, and there was no news from the beginning to the end. As a little senior sister, her worry was no less than anyone else's. Not yet. The last time I knew of Junior Brother Lin's whereabouts was during the South Continent Escort Agency Festival. He was being chased by an evil cultivator called the West Mountain Old Sect. It's said that he's from the West Mountain Evil Sect's mountain opening period. After that, there's no more news about him. Lu Bianren sighed. Even you didn't receive his message? Sai, little Junior Brother is really something. He doesn't know how to think about us who care about him. Shangguan Laner couldn't help but shake her head in disappointment. But even though he said that, but at this moment, there was a trace of joy in her heart. If Lin Yi only brought a letter to Lu Bianren and the others but not to her, didn't that mean that her position in Lin Yi's heart was lower than that of Lu Bianren and the others? Shangguan Laner had always regarded Lin Yi as her best friend in the three great pavilions. If that was really the case, then she would be very sad. Miss Shangguan, Junior Brother Lin can't be blamed for this. In fact, it's not that he doesn't want to send a message to us. It's just that the southern continent is a long way away, and it's not easy to find someone to deliver a message. Moreover, there's a powerful evil cultivator like the West Mountain Sect behind him. Even if there's a chance, he can't find someone to send a message, or his whereabouts might be exposed. Lu Bianren analyzed. Oh, that's true. Then I'll go back first. Since there was no news of Lin Yi, Shangguan Laner naturally wouldn't stay in Blue Cloud Pavilion. After saying goodbye, she immediately turned around and left with the little curly bear. But before she left, she suddenly turned back and added, if you have news of little Junior Brother, you must tell me immediately. Okay, Miss Shangguan, take care. Lu Bianren nodded and looked at the bouncing back of Shangguan Laner with a smile. He couldn't help but have an inexplicable thought. This soaring sky pavilion princess and Junior Brother Lin were really a good match. Presumably, Pavilion Master Shangguan would also be happy to see this kind of thing happen. After standing in place for a while, Lu Bianren suddenly came to his senses and hurriedly left, threatening to go to the southern continent to teach Lin Yi a lesson. This matter didn't seem to be just words. He had to quickly tell this news to everyone and gather them together to discuss countermeasures. After returning to Hualan residence, the first thing Shangguan Laner did was to rush into the study. She grabbed Shanghai Tianhua's pen and said solemnly, Grandpa, you're still in the mood to write? Something big has happened. What happened? Even you, little Laner, are in such a hurry? Shanghai Laner chuckled as she glanced sideways at herself, who had completed 90% of the ancient tablet inscription. The corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. This was a birthday gift that he had specially prepared for a certain big shot in the eastern continent. For this, he had specially taken out the ancient tablet inscription that he had collected for many years, and was widely believed to be extinct in the outside world. Of course, the ancient tablet inscription could not be given away, so Shanghai Tianhua decided to personally copy it. After all, he was one of the few calligraphers in the entire 5 major islands of the heavenly stage. Any of his calligraphy could be sold at a sky-high price. This gift would be very sincere no matter who he gave it to. After spending a whole 10 days, Shanghai Tianhua finally managed to copy 90% of the ancient tablet inscription. Now that he was about to finish, the brush was snatched away by Shanghai Laner, leaving a long ink mark on it. The previous 10 days of painstaking effort had been wasted in an instant. If it was someone else, they would have burst into tears. However, Shanghai Tianhua just chuckled. If it was destroyed, then so be it. At most, it would take some time to copy it again. Anyway, it was still early. Moreover, in his eyes, no matter what happened, it was not as important as his granddaughter. Someone slandered you in public, saying that grandpa has eyes but fails to see. Isn't this a big deal? Shanghai Laner snorted angrily, saying that I have eyes but fails to see? Shanghai Tianhua was stunned for a moment. Then he shook his head with a smile and said, "This can't be considered slandering. After all, grandpa is old. Sometimes it's normal for me to be dim-sighted. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Grandpa, you are the pavilion master of the soaring pavilion. Saying that you have eyes but fails to see. Doesn't that mean that you are not qualified to lead the soaring pavilion? This is a big deal. Grandpa, please be serious." Shanghai Laner said with a taut face. Old age and dim-sighted were normal words for ordinary people. But for cultivators, it was absolutely a joke. It was more appropriate to say that they were old and cunning, especially a super expert like Shanghai Tianhua. If even he was dim-sighted, then it was estimated that everyone on this heavenly island was blind. Good. Little Laner, tell me, what should grandpa do? Shanghai Tianhua looked at his angry granddaughter and said with a smile, "Of course, punish him. Otherwise, anyone can casually slander you in the future. 1,000-mile dike can be destroyed by an ant's nest. That will cause trouble. The prestige of the pavilion master cannot be violated. We must make an example out of him." Shanghai Laner said methodically. To be continued. 118. Chapter 4597. After all, Shanghai Laner had been educated in this aspect since she was a child. Although she usually looked naive and carefree, when it came to this kind of thing, she had a set of methods. "Oh, then who should I punish, grandfather?" Shanghai Tianhua laughed noncommittally. Shanghai Laner's words were not without reason. As the Soaring Sky Pavilion's pavilion master, he had always been known for his strength. If he said that he had eyes but failed to see some big shot, then Shanghai Tianhua might really make a move. However, since there was no news of it reaching his ears, it meant that it was definitely not one of those big shots. Naturally, he didn't need to take it to heart. Horse as a spear. It's that Blue Cloud Pavilion disciple who claims to be the super newcomer king. He slandered you in public, so he should be punished. Shanghai Laner said with conviction. Horse as a spear. Shanghai Tianhua thought for a moment, and remembered that there was indeed such a person. He couldn't help but ask, could it be that nascent soul stage newcomer? Yes, this person is very arrogant and despotic. Today, in front of many disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion, he almost strangled senior brother Lu Bianren of Blue Cloud Pavilion to death. Fortunately, I met him. Grandfather, don't you think this person is hateful? Shanghai Laner complained. There was such a thing. Could it be that the other disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion didn't save him? Shangguan Tianhua was slightly taken aback, but when he saw Shangguan Laner nod in affirmation, he couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. This Yu Zhenyang, he does have some ability, but unfortunately, he doesn't care about the Clear Cloud Pavilion's matters at all. All his disciples are like this. It will be difficult for the Clear Cloud Pavilion to rise again under his leadership. Yes, not only that, but he also threatened that you have eyes but failed to see. You mistook junior brother, a waste, for a genius. He also said that in order to prove this, he would personally go to South Island to destroy junior brother. It's really infuriating, Shanghai Laner said angrily with her hands on her hips. Whether it was Shanghai Tianhua or Lin Yi, they were the people she cared about the most. Now that the horse as a spear had trampled on both of them, it would be strange if Shanghai Laner didn't explode with anger. Oh, in that case, although this person is ostentatious, he's not completely brainless. He has made a shield for himself, Shanghai Tianhua said with a smile. It's just a little trick. What kind of shield is it? Grandpa, you're not going to pursue it, are you? Shanghai Laner said with a frown. Hee. Since he has said so, it's not appropriate for me to pursue it even if I want to. This has become a matter between him and Lin Yi. It's not convenient for me to express my opinion before the result is out. Shanghai Tianhua smiled and shook his head. Ah. Doesn't that mean that his plot has succeeded? Grandpa, you're too tolerant of this horse as a spear, aren't you? Shanghai Laner suddenly paused and looked at Shanghai Tianhua up and down suspiciously. She said, Grandpa, don't tell me you've taken a fancy to this horse as a spear again? Do you think he's also a genius? Looking at Shanghai Tianhua's expression, Shanghai Laner suddenly felt that she had made a mistake. She should have thought that with her grandfather's temperament, he wouldn't pursue this kind of small character at all. She complained like this, but instead, she let the horse as a spear into her grandfather's eyes. Maybe this was the other party's real intention. No, he's not. Shanghai Tianhua chuckled. He's not. Shanghai Laner was immersed in annoyance. When she heard this, she was stunned and said strangely, Isn't he the super newcomer king? And he's also a master of the nascent soul stage. It sounds like he's even more powerful than little junior brother. Shanghai Laner was really unhappy to see the horse as a spear, but she had to say it. From the point of view of the hard conditions, this so-called super newcomer king wasn't bragging, but he really had the capital. Even if Lin Yi were to compare with him, it would be difficult for him to gain the slightest advantage. He might even suffer a loss. This horse as a spear is indeed the super newcomer king. And it's also true that he's a master of the nascent soul stage. But this doesn't mean that he's a real genius. Shanghai Tianhua shook his head and said with a smile, The reason why he can become the newcomer king is because of the absolute suppression of the strength of the nascent soul stage. That's because of the absolute suppression of the nascent soul stage's strength. The opponents he encountered in the Inner Sanctum tournament were all Golden Core stage disciples. Of course, no one could stop his footsteps. But little Laner, think about it. What if his opponent was also a nascent soul stage expert? What other absolute advantages does he have? Oh yes, I understand. The reason why little junior brother is a super genius is that he can easily fight against enemies of a higher level. But this horse as a spear can't. Shanghai Laner suddenly patted her head and said excitedly, Yes, this is the gap in potential, which is much bigger than the gap in strength. Shanghai Tianhua nodded. He had never really observed the horse as a spear, or even seen it before. But he could conclude that this child certainly couldn't fight against enemies of a higher level like Lin Yi. The reason was very simple. A master of the nascent soul stage, who could fight against enemies of a higher level, would never put a master of the Golden Core stage in his eyes, let alone try to deal with a master of the Golden Core stage. Because he must always look up. Only then could he become stronger. Otherwise it was impossible to fight against enemies of a higher level. As the old saying goes, the bigger the stage is, the bigger the stage is. Hee. I said, how can this annoying guy be compared with little junior brother? This kind of person isn't even worthy of carrying shoes for little junior brother. Shanghai Laner was finally happy. She might doubt it if someone else said it, but it was her grandfather who said it, which meant it was true. Although it sounds biased, it is true. Strength itself doesn't mean anything, let alone a master of the nascent soul stage. Even if he is a master of the profound ascending stage, he is just an ant in my eyes, and there is no need to pay attention to him. But Lin Yi is different. His future potential is not as simple as being in the profound ascending stage. Shanghai Tianhua nodded. I see, but in this case, why don't you interfere, Grandpa? It's good that little junior brother has great potential, but now he is only in the Golden Core stage. If he is found by this horse as a spear, It will be very dangerous. It is rare for you to value a person so much. You can't let him be killed by this kind of trash. Shanghai Laner held Shanghai Tianhua's arm and said coquettishly, "It doesn't matter whether this horse as a spear goes to the South Island or not. It has no effect on Lin Yi." Shanghai Tianhua smiled faintly. "No effect? How can it be?" Shanghai Laner was confused. Although she didn't like the horse as a spear from the bottom of her heart, and felt that this person didn't deserve to be compared with Lin Yi, he was still a master of the nascent soul stage. With Lin Yi's current strength, it would still be a headache to meet him, right? Chapter 4598. If he can successfully escape this disaster, then what can he do even if he acts as a spear? Even the opening mountain stage evil cultivators can't stop Lin Yi, but he, a mere nascent soul stage, can stop him? Shanghai Tianhua smiled indifferently. And if Lin Yi can't escape the pursuit of Shishan Elder, then whether he acts as a spear or not, it will be meaningless. So that's how it is. Shanghai Laner understood what he meant. After being stunned for a moment, she suddenly said, "Grandpa, how do you know this? I specially went to ask Lu Bianren today to know." "Oh, I understand, Grandpa. You have been asking people to inquire about the news of little junior brother, right? Why didn't you tell me?" "It's meaningless to tell you. In addition to letting you worry about him in vain, what else can it do?" Shanghai Tianhua smiled, and actually acquiesced to the matter of asking people to inquire about Lin Yi's news. "You still have to tell me as soon as possible. Otherwise I will be more worried if there is no news at all." Shanghai Laner pouted and complained. Okay. Next time I receive news related to Lin Yi, I will tell you, okay?" Shanghai Tianhua had no resistance to his granddaughter's coquettish offensive, so he had to comply with it with a bitter smile. Hee, that's more like it." Shanghai Laner nodded with satisfaction. "I say, little Lan since you know that Lin Yi is being chased by Shishan Elder, aren't you worried at all? That is a master of the opening mountain stage, a giant evil cultivator, who can make Lin Yi's corpse disappear with a casual move of his finger." Shanghai Tianhua looked at Shanghai Laner's reaction, and couldn't help but feel a little strange. This little girl is obviously worried that Lin Yi will be used as a spear to retaliate. But it seems that she is not worried about Shishan Elder at all. What logic is this? The disciples of the other three pavilions may not have a concept of the giant of the opening mountain stage, but Shanghai Laner will definitely not. This kind of transcendental level that ordinary people can't even hear about is the minimum common sense in their Shangguan family. It has been taught as early as when they were young. I'm worried. However, I have always been praying for him, so I believe that he definitely won't die in the hands of an evil cultivator. Shangguan Laner giggled, and then immediately skipped away with the little curly bear. As expected, girls are attracted to their husbands. The old saying is true. Shangguan Tianhua laughed and shook his head. Shangguan Laner had always prayed for her father. She didn't even know whether her grandfather, whom she depended on for survival, was on the list. He didn't expect that this little girl would put Lin Yi on it first. Shanghai Tianhua was lost in thought for a moment. He inadvertently glanced at the inscription on the tablet that he had copied. The long ink mark on it was really unbearable to look at. His smile suddenly turned into a bitter smile. "Well, I'll be busy again." Shanghai Laner was not worried about the matter that Ma Piapiao threatened to go to the South Island to destroy Lin Yi. However, Lu Bianren and others didn't see it as clearly as Shanghai Tianhua. Now, after they gathered in Lu Bianren's cave residence, they all had lingering worries on their faces. They were confident in Lin Yi's strength, but the shock brought by Ma Piapiao last time was too great. They couldn't even withstand one move from him. Even with the combined strength of all of them, they were not people who belittled themselves, but this sense of powerlessness was real, and it would continue to amplify with time. It was no exaggeration to say that the three words nascent soul stage had left a shadow in everyone's heart. Unless Lin Yi also became a master of nascent soul stage, it was difficult for them to have 100% confidence. This kind of thing is unlikely to be an impromptu idea. Since Ma Piapiao dared to say so in public, it means that he has been prepared for it. It's not just to bluff his way through in front of Shanghai Laner. Therefore, we must treat this matter carefully and come up with a solution as soon as possible, Lu Bianren said to everyone in a deep voice. That's what you said. But now we don't know junior brother Lin's whereabouts at all. Even if we want to remind him, we can't do it. Senior brother Kubai frowned and said. Everyone fell into silence. This was an unsolvable problem. No matter who it was, they would be helpless. In fact, I don't think you need to worry so much. We don't know Boss Lin Yi's whereabouts, and Ma Piapiao doesn't know either. Even if he really chooses a trial task to go to the South Island, it will be difficult for him to find Boss Lin Yi. The possibility of him returning empty-handed is at least 90%. Li Zhengming analyzed. Zhengming's words make sense. Even West Mountain Elder Zone can't find Boss Lin Yi's whereabouts. It's not easy for Ma Piapiao to do this. Xiao Ran nodded and agreed. But it's not a good idea to keep no news of Boss Lin Yi. Since Ma Piapiao wants to go to the South Island to make trouble, why don't we just go to the South Island? No matter whether we can find him or not, it's always right to try, right? Xiao Honkai suddenly suggested. Hearing this, everyone's eyes suddenly lit up and they all slapped their thighs. Right, since Ma Piapiao could go to the South Island, they could also go there. Honkai, you're right. If so many of us stay here, Ma Piapiao will probably make trouble for us. It's better to take a task and go to the South Island to look for him. It's better than worrying here. Lu Bianren immediately said excitedly. With so many people, they were too big of a target, and Ma Dun was obviously holding back his anger. Maybe one day the thrilling scene would happen again. At that time, it would be too much of a loss if someone died. After all, Jia Mufan or Shengguan Lan'er would not always be there to help them out. But the South Island is so big. Looking for a person is like looking for a needle in a haystack. How can we find him? Senior brother Qiao Qiao was at a loss and spread out his hands. Don't worry about this. After all, I've been to the South Island, and I know something about it. Besides, I also know an acquaintance of junior brother Lin there. I believe we can get some clues from him, and he won't be a headless fly running around everywhere. The acquaintance Lu Bianren referred to was naturally Qi Wenhan. It was Qi Wenhan who helped him get out of the South Island successfully. That's great. There's no time to lose. Let's choose a time to go. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up, and they were all eager to have a try. Since an acquaintance had clues, there was no need to hesitate. Chapter 4599. Then who will go and who will stay? Everyone looked at each other. From the bottom of their hearts, they all wanted to go. But what Lu Bianren said made sense. If all of them went, it would only do more harm than good. After all, they were going to look for someone, not to fight a war. Numbers were useless. I definitely have to go, Lu Bianren said first. He was the only one among them who had been to the South Continent Sea area, and only he knew Qi Wenhan, so there was no doubt about it. I definitely have to go. I came up with this idea, and I will fight anyone who tries to stop me. Xiao Honkai quickly raised her hand and said, Then I have to go. Junior brother Lin has taken care of me the most. Without him, I wouldn't be where I am today. If I don't go, am I still a human? Senior brother Bitter said immediately. Boss Lin Yi and I came up from the secular world together. We have known each other for the longest time, and our friendship is the deepest. If I don't go, it will be even more unreasonable. Xiao Ran also said. As soon as Xiao Ran's voice faded, everyone's eyes focused on Li Zhengming. He was the only one left, and he had to be the one to stay behind. Unexpectedly, this guy said slowly, Boss Lin gave me my life, don't expect me to stay. None of the 5 people was willing to stay, and each of them had a good reason. Everyone looked at each other. What should they do? They couldn't draw lots, could they? Not to mention that this method was not feasible. The point was that no one would agree. What if they were chosen to stay? After a moment of silence, Lu Bianren finally made the decision. After all, he was the most senior and the most powerful one among them. Besides, he was highly trusted and could be regarded as a man of virtue and prestige. His words carried enormous weight. Well, junior brother Ku and junior brother Xiao, You two stay here to guard. I, Honkai, and Zhengming will go to the South Island. Why? Senior brother Bitter and Xiao Ran frowned at the same time. Xiao Honkai and Li Jingming were happy, but why should they stay? The reason is simple. One of you is the third pavilion master of the Welcoming Pavilion, and the other is the second senior brother of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's outer court manager. Both of you hold important positions, Lu Bianren explained to the two with a bitter smile. What was especially worth mentioning was that Xiao Ran had suddenly jumped from the position of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's senior disciple supervisor to the position of the second senior disciple supervisor of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's outer court supervisor a month ago. This was a huge promotion. The difference in status and authority between the two was huge. Although the second senior disciple supervisor of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's outer court supervisor's authority was not particularly great, this kind of opportunity was absolutely enviable to others. One must know that even those second-generation cultivators would have to pay a hefty price to operate this position. In particular, Xiao Ran had only joined the Blue Cloud Pavilion for 3 years. Even if he had been the senior disciple supervisor for a year, it was still difficult to put his qualifications on the table. In fact, when this appointment was first proposed, it caused a huge controversy. 80% of the Blue Cloud Pavilion elders slammed the table, because this was a gold-plated position specially prepared for them. How could they inexplicably give it to an outsider? And an outsider with no foundation at all. The person who previously occupied this position was Lu Bianren. However, after Lu Bianren disappeared for a long time, this position was automatically vacated. Even after Lu Bianren returned, this position was automatically vacated. Even after Lu Bianren returned, he did not continue to hold it. The official reason was because he was already a Golden Core disciple and automatically entered the Blue Cloud Pavilion's inner court. However, in fact, several Blue Cloud Pavilion elders were already secretly competing for this position, and some of them even fought until their heads were bleeding. In this kind of situation, Xiao Ran suddenly appeared. Wasn't this a slap to their faces? Was this a joke? However, in the end, this strange appointment was passed without any suspense. This was because the person who proposed this was the senior disciple supervisor of the Blue Cloud Pavilion's inner court, Jiamufan. More importantly, the pavilion master of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, Yu Jinyang, approved it in public. Even if the Blue Cloud Pavilion elders were unwilling, they still did not dare to oppose Yu Jinyang for such a small matter. Even if they were unwilling, they did not dare to oppose Yu Jinyang for such a small matter. No matter what, Yu Jinyang was still the Clear Cloud Pavilion's pavilion lord. Don't be fooled by the fact that in front of characters like Shangguan Tianhua, Yu Jinyang had always put on a harmless and kind face, but if it was one of the Clear Cloud Pavilion's elders, this fellow would never show mercy. After all, this was a powerful existence who had walked out from a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. No one knew what Yu Jinyang was thinking, and no one knew what Jiamufan was thinking either. Anyway, the result was that Xiao Ran suddenly became the second senior disciple supervisor of the outer court of the Blue Cloud Pavilion. From then on, he officially entered the eyes of the senior management of the Blue Cloud Pavilion and took a solid step toward a position of real power. So what? Senior brother Lu, you were the second senior disciple supervisor of the outer court before. But didn't you still go to the South Island? Senior brother Ku and Xiao Ran asked almost at the same time. That's why I lost this position. Lu Bianren shook his head with a wry smile and said solemnly, Junior brother Ku, junior brother Xiao, we're only going to the South Island to look for someone this time, so we don't need a lot of people. More importantly, we don't know how long we'll be gone. It's not surprising that we'll be gone for a year and a half. With your current positions, it'll be a big problem if you disappear for more than a month. It doesn't matter. At worst, I don't have this position, Xiao Ran said disapprovingly. That's right. My position as the third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion was fought for by junior brother Lin. If I sit back and do nothing when something happens to him, I won't be able to keep this position. It's better not to take it. Senior brother Ku nodded and said, Stupid! Lu Bianren suddenly pointed at their noses and scolded. Since you know it's junior brother Lin's hard work, why did you throw it away so casually? Do you think this is loyalty? Wrong, you're so wrong. This is utter stupidity. You've let down junior brother Lin's painstaking efforts. How can you still have the face to look for him? Being scolded by Lu Bianren suddenly, senior brother Ku and Xiao Ran immediately fell silent. After all, when they thought about it carefully, it really made sense. There's a reason why I asked you two to stay. Because of your positions, you two can't leave for too long. The key is that you two are more or less important people. Even if others want to hurt you, they have to think twice first. So you two are more suitable to stay and guard than Hongkai and Zhengming. Do you understand? Lu Bianren continued to persuade them earnestly. Okay, then we'll stay. Senior brother Ku and Xiao Ran looked at each other and nodded. Just as Lu Bianren said, they were the most suitable to stay in the North Island, no matter from which point of view. Okay, in that case, let's go now. Let's see if there are any suitable trial tasks. Lu Bianren immediately made the decision. Chapter 4600. When they arrived at the Cultivators Guild in the North Island, the hall was as crowded as ever. When they were about to look for tasks related to the South Island, a weird voice suddenly came from behind. Yo, enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. I didn't expect to meet you in this place. Lu Bianren, do you think it's my luck or your misfortune? Hearing this voice, everyone was startled and quickly turned around to look behind them. Ma Daoqiang was swaggering in front of the door with his arms swinging in the air, and behind him were two flattering lackeys. Both of them were Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples. The people around immediately talked about it. Ma Daoqiang was now a household name in the North Island. Those who didn't know him were too embarrassed to go out. No matter where he went, he was the absolute focus. You want to fight again? Lu Bianren's face darkened. Although he was gentle, he couldn't help getting angry at the thought of what happened last time. He said coldly, "This is a public place. If you are sure you can bear the consequences, we will fight you to the end." While Lu Bianren was talking, Xiao Hongkai and others were eager to have a try, although they knew they were no match for him. Since they met on a narrow road, there was no reason for them to run away in embarrassment. As a man, the worst thing was to die. What was there to be afraid of? What's more, they were still trying to get revenge for what happened last time. You're pretty tough, aren't you? Ma Daoqiang sneered and raised his eyelids. The killing intent flashed in his eyes, but he finally restrained it and said carelessly, "Forget it, I'm not in the mood today. I'll spare your lives, but it's hard to say next time. So I advise you to stay away and live a long life if you know what's good for you." What he said was beautiful, but in fact, Ma Daoqiang wasn't so kind. The reason why he didn't fight like last time was that there were too many people here, and he was afraid. After all, among them, there was not only Guyu, the third pavilion master of Welcome Pavilion. Moreover, there was also Xiao Ran, the newly promoted second senior brother of Blue Cloud Pavilion's outer gate supervisor. If he killed them in public, it would definitely be a big event that would cause a sensation in the North Island. No matter how much the higher-ups of Blue Cloud Pavilion thought highly of him, they didn't dare to speak up for him. Same here, Lu Bianren said coldly as he stopped Xiao Hongkai and the others who were about to attack. He lowered his voice and said, "Hurry up and find the missions to go to the South Island. Take all the available ones. Don't let this bastard get ahead of you." Everyone was shocked. Only then did they react, and they quickly split up to search. Ma Daoqiang must have come here with the same intention. The words he said before were not just empty words. They must not let him get ahead of them. Seeing everyone's reaction, Ma Daoqiang was slightly stunned, but he didn't expect that they also wanted to take the task and go to the South Island. After a sneer, he swaggered into the mission hall and forced the others to give him a table to sit down. Then he sent his two followers to look for missions. The North Island and the South Island were thousands of miles apart, and they had nothing to do with each other. Therefore, although there were all kinds of reward missions on the mission list, the missions related to the South Island were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. You might not find one in 10 days or half a month. It was pure luck that Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao could get one last time. Lu Bianren and the others searched up and down for a long time, but finally found nothing. Only Li Zhengming stopped in the most inconspicuous corner. On a shabby yellow wooden mission board, there was a line of small words. Collecting rare spiritual herbs in Lufeng Forest in the South Island. Time limit, unlimited number of people. Unlimited. This was a team mission of the South Island tailor-made for them. Li Zhengming was overjoyed at once. He quickly took off the wooden mission board, winked at Lu Bianren and the others, and then hurried to go through the procedures to receive the reward mission. However, when Li Zhengming and the others came to the place to receive the mission, they found that the person sitting there swaggeringly was Ma Daqiang. The steward of the guild was standing aside, bowing and bowing. Everyone knew that Ma Daqiang had a bright future, especially now that he was the second senior brother of the inner core steward of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Of course, they would try their best to win over such a big shot. Steward Zhou, you should know why I'm here this time. If you have any team mission to the South Island, hurry up and take it out. Those two idiots haven't found it for a long time. Did you hide it? Ma Daqiang said carelessly, crossing his legs. What are you talking about? Our reward mission is for everyone to do. How can we hide it on purpose? What's more, Steward Ma, we wouldn't dare to do such a thing even if we had 10,000 guts. The steward smiled apologetically and said, Steward Ma, there are few missions to the South Island. It's rare to see one every 10 days or half a month. It's normal that we can't find it for a while. Don't talk nonsense. Just tell me whether you have it or not. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Ma Daqiang curled his lips impatiently. I don't think so. The steward scratched his head awkwardly. At this time, a staff sitting not far away suddenly came over and whispered something. Then his eyes lit up and he said, Yes. There's a mission to collect rare spiritual herbs in the South Island. It's been left empty because the reward isn't high enough, and the Chamber of Commerce hasn't cancelled it, so it's been forgotten. Are you interested, Senior Brother Ma? Then I'll take this one. Ma Daqiang nodded. He came to receive the mission, just for an excuse. The reward was secondary, and he didn't care about it at all. Sorry, we've already received this mission. Lu Bianren suddenly walked in, holding the wooden mission board in his hand and smiling faintly. What? Ma Daqiang was stunned at first. He looked carefully at the wooden mission board in Lu Bianren's hand, and his face immediately darkened. He didn't expect that these cowards were also here to receive the mission of the South Island, and they were one step ahead of him. Steward, please help us register. Lu Bianren didn't care about Ma Daqiang at all, and there seemed to be a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Although his strength was not as good as Ma Daqiang's, it was also a relief to be one step ahead of him in this matter. The steward couldn't help but look at Ma Daqiang awkwardly. According to the rules of the North Island Cultivators Guild, of course, it was first come first served. Since Lu Bianren and the others got the wooden mission board first, this team mission of the South Island undoubtedly belonged to them. But wouldn't it be obvious that they were offending Ma Daqiang? What? Have the rules of the North Island Cultivators Guild changed? And there's even a problem with receiving a mission? Lu Bianren frowned slightly. If the steward sided with Ma Daqiang in this matter, then he would have to make a big deal out of it. Anyway, the reason was on his side. Chapter 4601. No. The manager of the guild had a bitter look on his face. He looked back and forth between the two groups of people who came with bad intentions, but he was complaining in his heart. What a bad day today. Why did such a hot potato suddenly come to me? He didn't dare to offend Ma Pike, but Lu Bianren and his group were not nobodies after all. He was just a small manager of the guild. If he dared to make things difficult for Lu Bianren and his group in public, it would not only ruin the reputation of the North Island Cultivators Guild, but also ruin his own bright future. There's a way to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you want to break in. It's the first time I've seen idiots like you. At this time, Ma Daqiang suddenly opened his mouth and laughed coldly. Originally, I was in a good mood today, and was thinking of being merciful and letting you guys go. Unfortunately, you guys didn't have eyes and sent yourselves to me. What should I say? Since you're in a hurry to die, I can only reluctantly give you a hand. Do you really have the guts to do that in front of so many people? Lu Bianren looked at him coldly. Although his strength was not good, his aura was not the slightest bit weaker. In this kind of situation where people were coming and going, he was sure that the other party would not dare to start a fight, let alone kill him in public, unless he wanted to be buried with him. What? Don't tell me that my courage is so small in the eyes of these cowards? Ha 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 ha. There's a limit to deceiving yourself. It's a bit troublesome to kill you like this, but it shouldn't be a big problem to just cripple you. Do you really think you're a piece of cake? Ma Pike sneered with a ferocious face. He gestured to the two minions guarding the door and said, "Close the door." The task collection office was a separate room. Although it was only separated from the bustling task hall by a wall, it could be more or less hidden if the door was closed. Of course, it was impossible to hide from people outside with this wall. But Ma Pike was just a formality. As long as the process was not so ostentatious, it would not be a big problem. Bang! The two minions hurriedly answered and closed the door. They looked at Lu Bianren and the others with eyes full of ridicule. Using the horse as a spear, it was obvious that they wanted to beat the dogs behind closed doors. There was going to be a good show to watch. Lu Bianren and the others' expressions changed slightly when they saw this. They did not expect Reckless Spear to be so audacious. However, when they thought of the last two encounters they had, Reckless Spear had always been unscrupulous. If Jia Mufan and Shengguan Laner had not stepped in to save them, they would not have been able to stand here unscathed. Therefore they were not surprised. Although they were surprised, they knew that they were not as strong as the other party. However, Lu Bianren and the others were not afraid at this time. They were willing to sacrifice themselves to drag the emperor down from his high horse. Moreover, the opponent was only a nascent soul expert. At worst, they would just die. What was there to be afraid of? Everyone, let's talk this out. Don't act rashly. It's not good for anyone. The guild manager quickly tried to smooth things over. He did not care about the lives of Lu Bianren and the others. But once the two sides fought here, the North Island Cultivators Guild would definitely be in big trouble. If the higher-ups put the blame on them, who could he ask for justice? Unfortunately, whether it was Reckless Spear or Lu Bianren and the others, at this moment, they did not care about his feelings, especially when Reckless Spear was suppressing his anger. In the face of this group of weak cowards, they had jumped over his head. With his tyrannical temper, it would be strange if he could endure it. From today onwards, every one of you is a useless person. Enjoy the life of a useless person who can't see the light of day. Ha 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 ha. Reckless Spear laughed arrogantly. Suddenly, the floor under their feet cracked into 5 cracks without warning. With a sharp whistle that pierced through their eardrums, the cracks spread toward the feet of Lu Bianren and the others. Although the 5 cracks were in the same direction, each of them was pointing at one person. Lu Bianren and the other 4's expressions immediately changed, as if they were facing a great enemy. Last time when they fought with Ma Daoguang, they were at a disadvantage because of this move. Once they waited for the sharp thrust of the dagger, they would be finished. Reckless Spear didn't know what exactly it was, but this move of Reckless Spear was really powerful. Even a master in the gold core stage couldn't bear such an attack. Moreover, except for Lu Bianren, the others were only in the foundation building stage. The gap in strength was too big, and it was impossible to defend against it even if they wanted to. Reckless Spear looked at this scene and grinned hideously. The backbone and courage of Lu Bianren and the others were really not simple. Unfortunately, in the face of absolute strength, it was just a joke. First, I'll make these idiots disabled, and then I'll see if they are still so stubborn. The cracks spread so fast that before Lu Bianren and the others could react, the 5 deadly cracks had already spread to their feet. Next, they would repeat the same mistake as last time. Once they were hit by the sharp thorns, even if they were lucky enough not to die, they would be half disabled. The wound on Lu Bianren's thigh was still faintly painful. At this time, no matter who was in the position of Lu Bianren and the others, it was absolutely a lie to say that they were not nervous. After all, it was a life-threatening situation. If they could successfully avoid it, they still had a chance to meet the opponent's next attack. But if they couldn't avoid it, then their life would end here. Senior Marshall Brother's face instantly became pale, and his mind was blank. At this moment, the only thing he could do was to close his eyes tightly. He was ready to die generously. However, after waiting for a moment, the sharp thorns that appeared in his nightmares countless times did not appear. How could it be? Senior Brother Kubai opened his eyes in shock and doubt, only to find that although the crack in the ground was still there was not the slightest fluctuation of true chi at the moment, nor was there any terrifying killing intent or attack. Not only him, but Liu Bianren and the others beside him also had looks of surprise on their faces. Following their incredulous gazes, a figure suddenly appeared 3 steps away from them. It was a figure that looked very familiar. Ever since this person suddenly appeared, the extremely sharp thrust of the horse's spear had somehow disappeared into thin air, as if it had never appeared in the first place. I haven't seen you for a year and a half. How is everyone? When this person turned around with a smile, the eyes of Liu Bianren and the others suddenly turned red. This person was actually Lin Yi. Chapter 4602. What? Are you going to the South Island? It's not necessary to go so far to collect elixirs, is it? Lin Yi glanced at the task wooden plate in Liu Bianren's hand and felt a little moved. Of course, he could guess the purpose of these people risking their lives to go to the South Island. With their little strength, it was absolutely impossible for them to go to the chaotic South Island. But they still made this decision. He must keep this friendship in mind. Junior Brother Lin. After being stunned for a long time, they finally came to their senses. Shouting, they rushed up and hugged Lin Yi fiercely. This group of pure men, who were unafraid of death, had red eyes and were full of tears at this moment. This movement immediately attracted the crazy crowd outside. When Lin Yi came in from the task hall, some people with sharp eyes had already recognized his identity. At this moment, hearing Liu Bianren and others' greetings, they were more convinced of Lin Yi's identity. This was the former legendary newcomer king, a super genius that even Shanghai Tianhua thought highly of. The news of Lin Yi's return immediately spread like wildfire. People crowded outside the door to watch the fun. At this moment, except for Lin Yi and Liu Bianren, who had been reunited with each other for a long time, and the guild steward standing aside in fear, there was only one person left in the door who looked a little pale. Although he had never seen Lin Yi before, he couldn't recognize Lin Yi's identity from the scene in front of him. Then he would just find a piece of tofu and kill himself. This was the person he had been deliberately planning to deal with. More precisely, this was the stepping stone he thought he had to step on. The reason why he came here today was to take a task to go to the South Island to find Lin Yi. Unexpectedly, this guy took the initiative to show up. This kind of situation really made people speechless. For the person who was like a spear, of course, it was a good thing that he didn't have to travel thousands of miles to the South Island. But now he inevitably felt a little unprepared. He couldn't be happy, and his mood was really a little complicated. Junior Brother Lin, why did you suddenly come back? Liu Bianren couldn't help but ask, and the nearby senior brothers had surprised expressions as well. They were worried earlier that Lin Yi's fate was unknown, and they didn't hesitate to risk their lives to go against him. Yet never had they imagined that happiness would come so suddenly. Once Lin Yi returned, they could be said to have found their backbone. Hee, I'll naturally come back when I'm done with my business. As Lin Yi spoke, he looked around and said to the guild manager, I previously accepted the mission to capture the evil cultivator Wu Baoliang. Although it has long expired, I still have some time to search for him. However, it has already been completed. This can be proven by the intelligence of the 3 great pavilions. This time, I'm here to hand in the mission. If he hadn't come back to hand in the task, he wouldn't have come to the North Island Cultivators Guild first. Although he had received this task from Jia Mufan, it was essentially from the North Island Cultivators Guild. If he wanted to hand in the task, He could only come here. Turn in the mission? Evil cultivator Wu Baoliang? Hearing this, the guild manager was stunned. He couldn't help scratching his head and said with a strange expression, "But this task has been cancelled." It was senior brother Jia Mufan of Blue Cloud Pavilion, who personally told me about it. Yes, we told senior brother Jia about it. Lu Bianren nodded and said, "Oh, okay then." Lin Yi nodded indifferently. As for the reward of the task, he didn't care about it at all. He immediately put his hand on everyone's shoulder and said happily, "Then let's hurry back. We haven't seen each other for so long. Let's have a good reunion." With regards to this suggestion, everyone naturally went along with it. They immediately crowded around Lin Yi and left in high spirits. Since Lin Yi had come back, of course, they didn't need to accept the task of the South Island anymore. Even Ma Daiqiang, who had just put a lot of pressure on them, had been forgotten at this moment. Ma Daiqiang's face suddenly turned livid. Lin Yi didn't even look at him from beginning to end. This feeling made him feel like he had become a dispensable clown. Being completely ignored, how could he swallow such resentment? "Stop!" Ma Daiqiang suddenly roared, which attracted everyone's attention. He looked up and down at Lin Yi coldly and pretended to be disdainful. "Are you Lin Yi? Oh, who are you?" Lin Yi looked back at him and remembered that it was this guy who had attacked Lu Bianren and the others just now, but Lin Yi had resolved it. If he hadn't been too happy to see Lu Bianren and the others, Lin Yi would not have been so arrogant as to forget this guy. No matter who he was, since he dared to attack his brother, he had to be punished. Lin Yi's expression and tone of looking at a passerby stimulated Ma Daiqiang, whose self-esteem was bursting. Before, no matter where he went, he was the protagonist who shone brightly and was sought after. However, now that Lin Yi came, everyone's attention was unconsciously focused on him. Ma Daiqiang, the super rookie king who thought highly of himself, didn't even have the treatment of being looked at. "I'm your grandfather," Ma Daiqiang angrily blurted out on the spot. A mere stepping stone that was about to be stepped on by him dared to put on airs in front of him. He really didn't know what was good for him. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Their gazes towards Ma Daiqiang subconsciously became a bit lighter. Although they were indeed very optimistic about this super rookie king of the original infant stage, experts needed to have a bearing. Only an ant-like commoner would open his mouth and say that he was their grandfather. Ma Daiqiang's bearing was really not flattering. Oh! Under everyone's gaze, Lin Yi didn't have the slightest intention of getting angry. He just looked at this guy indifferently, then turned to the side and asked, "Senior Ku, where did this madman come from?" As soon as these words came out, there was a sudden uproar outside the door. Due to Ma Daiqiang's strength, they didn't dare to ridicule him. However, when Lin Yi said this, there was a clear hint of sympathy on his face. A dignified super rookie king of the original infant stage was actually treated as a madman. How could people endure this if word got out? This was the first time Lin Yi, the previous rookie king, and Ma Daiqiang, the current rookie king, met face to face. It was like Mars colliding with Earth. It was already a gimmick, but when Lin Yi said this, it added a bit of tension. The audience outside the door suddenly became interested, and more people gathered after hearing the news. Even the door of the room was about to be trampled. Senior Ku explained to Lin Yi, "This person is called Ma Daiqiang. He is also a disciple of our Blue Cloud Pavilion." Chapter 4603. Noisy. Lin Yi pursed his lips when he saw the lackey trying to intimidate him. He stretched out his left hand and waved it slightly. An invisible force immediately sent the lackey flying. He screamed and fell into the crowd. The crowd behind him kicked him and stomped him into a human cushion. It was a pitiful sight. As the saying goes, you have to look at the master before you beat a dog. You dared to hit my lackey in front of me. It looks like you're ready to fight me? I've seen arrogant people before, but it's the first time I've seen such an arrogant idiot like you. Ma Daiqiang's face darkened. Lin Yi's move was not a big deal in his eyes, but since he dared to send his lackey flying, it was equivalent to a declaration of war. "Hee, you flatter me. You should give this kind of evaluation to yourself. Lin Yi shook his head indifferently. He still had a smile on his face and said, Newcomer King, right? Oh, nice to meet you, Newcomer King. But even if you're the Newcomer King, there's no need to be so pretentious, right? Even I, the pretentious leader, have to admit that I'm inferior. Pretentious? Ma Daoqiang subconsciously looked at his lackey, who was still wailing at the foot of the crowd. He thought to himself, who the fuck is pretentious? No wonder he's the pretentious leader. He then sneered and said, I heard that you're the previous Newcomer King? Oh, that's old news. I haven't been the Newcomer King for many years. Hearing people say that makes me feel like I'm pretending to be young and inexperienced. I'll be laughed at. Lin Yi smiled playfully. The crowd outside the door burst into laughter when they heard that. The smell of gunpowder on both sides was getting stronger and stronger. Normal people knew that the two Newcomer Kings would definitely fight today. There were even some nosy people who had already opened bets. Although most people felt that Ma Daoqiang, the original infant stage Newcomer King, had a higher chance of winning, in terms of temperament, it was obvious that Lin Yi had the upper hand. Hearing the roar of laughter from the crowd, Ma Daoqiang couldn't help but feel like he was being played like a monkey. He knew that he wouldn't be able to gain any advantage by talking big. He could only fly into a rage out of humiliation. It's useless to only know how to talk. That's what trash does. You and I are both rookie kings. Since we've coincidentally met today, do you dare to challenge me? At this moment, there was only one thought in Ma Dang's mind. Only strength is the way of the king. When this guy is stepped on by me, let's see if he can still smile. It's not wrong to call you a madman. Do you think I have nothing better to do than to challenge you? You want to bite anyone you see? Are you rabid? If you're sick, treat it quickly. Don't delay. Lin Yi frowned slightly. Then, without saying anything, he suddenly released his whole body's momentum. The powerful aura of the peak of the early stage of nascent soul instantly suppressed everyone around him. Although Lin Yi always had the habit of hiding his strength, the peak of the early stage of nascent soul could only be regarded as his strength on paper. Even if it was known by others, it wouldn't matter. He might as well show it to frighten this clown. After all, he had just returned to the North Island, and he didn't want to have an unnecessary conflict with Ma Dang, who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He might as well scare him away. For Lin Yi, gathering with these brothers was the most important thing. Besides, he had to find time to go to the King of Rags and see how the casting pool was doing. He didn't have time to talk nonsense with Ma Dang. Although Ma Dang was arrogant and was a superior rookie king in the eyes of ordinary people, in Lin Yi's eyes, he was at best a child. He had seen all kinds of top existences in South State. Not to mention the mountain opening period. He had even seen the super fierce beasts above the earth opening period and the sea splitting period. Compared with these behemoths, the rookie king of the three pavilions was nothing. Seeing that Lin Yi suddenly released his aura without reservation, the onlookers crowded outside the door were shocked. Even Lu Bianren and others standing next to him couldn't believe it. They had always thought that Lin Yi's strength was only at the gold core stage, so they were so worried that Ma Dang would make trouble for them. They didn't expect that after such a short time, Lin Yi had become a master at the peak of the early stage of nascent soul. The reason why the onlookers were optimistic about Ma Dang was that he was a master at the nascent soul stage, and he had absolute strength to suppress Lin Yi, the previous rookie king. Even if they knew that Lin Yi could defeat people at a higher level, they wouldn't believe that he, a master at the gold core stage, could challenge a master at the nascent soul stage. But now it was different. Not only was Lin Yi not at the gold core stage, but he was actually at the peak of the early stage of nascent soul stage. It seemed that this so-called rookie king had really kicked an iron plate. One had to know that he was only at the early stage of nascent soul stage. This scene not only made everyone's expression change, even Ma Dang himself was stunned. Originally, he looked at Lin Yi with a look of contempt, but now it disappeared. He grinned and said, "Peak of the early stage of nascent soul stage? So powerful. Do you think you are invincible? Do you think you can scare me away like this?" Hearing Ma Dang's strange tone, everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Could it be that this guy couldn't accept such a big psychological gap? So he was going to pretend to be more powerful than he was? However, when they saw Ma Dang's next move, they could not help but be shocked again. In their impression, Ma Dang, the Rookie King, was always arrogant, but they didn't expect that this guy had hidden his strength before. He was not a master at the early stage of nascent soul stage, but at the middle stage of nascent soul stage. Everyone suddenly became more excited. The confrontation between the two Rookie Kings was such a gimmick, and now it was like a roller coaster. They thought that Lin Yi suddenly showed his strength at the peak of the early stage of nascent soul stage, but they didn't expect Ma Dang, the new Rookie King, to be even stronger. They were right to watch the show today. According to the development of the situation, the two sides were bound to fight. At that time, they would become the focus of the whole North Island. Now there was no shortage of talking points to brag to others. Ha 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 ha. Ma Dang laughed. The stunned expressions of everyone just satisfied his vanity. His expression then returned to the condescending one. He glanced at Lin Yi and said, "How is it? You didn't expect it, did you?" "Oh, so what?" Lin Yi didn't even move his eyelids from beginning to end. He still looked at Ma Dang with a faint smile, and his eyes were full of ridicule. "How is it? Are you out of your mind?" Ma Dang looked at Lin Yi like he was looking at an idiot and said, "I am a master at the middle stage of nascent soul stage. If you know what's good for you, kneel down and kowtow. I can spare your life because we are from the same sect. But if you don't know what's good for you, then don't blame me for not showing mercy." Chapter 4604. Hehe, I really don't understand. Even if you are a middle stage original level cultivator, so what? Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. "I'm stronger than you." Ma Daqiang looked at Lin Yi's expression. He felt as if he'd punched empty air, and that little bit of joy he'd been feeling vanished without a trace. He smiled coldly as he said, "Are you playing dumb? Or are you really dumb? Are you so scared that you can't even tell the difference in cultivation level? Or is it that you, a mere early stage original level cultivator, think you have the ability to act tough in front of me? Oh, so you're talking about this. I thought you knew me very well. You haven't even heard of my most basic specialty, and you dare to provoke me with that? Haven't you heard of the saying, know thyself and know thy enemy? Haven't you been educated?" Lin Yi chuckled nonchalantly. "Specialty?" Ma Dang froze for a moment and then coldly snorted. "I've heard of it. Everyone says that you, the former newcomer king, are very good at acting tough. Do you admit that you're the head of acting tough?" "Humph. But seeing that we're from the same sect, I'll give you a sentence out of kindness. Only those with strength can be called acting tough. Those without strength are called idiots. The title of head of acting tough doesn't suit weaklings like you. I'll reluctantly take it on for you. Ha 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 ha. Hehe. I didn't expect you to be so warm-hearted. Since you want it so much, then I'll give it to you. I don't care about this title anyway." Lin Yi faintly smiled and then continued. "But since you said we're from the same sect, then I'll remind you out of morality, lest you say I'm bullying you. Oh, then I'll give you this chance. If you have anything to say it quickly. Otherwise you'll say I don't respect you. I didn't even give you this chance. No matter what, you're the former newcomer king. Even if you're past your prime, I still have to give you some face." Ma Dang pretended to be polite. Every time he opened his mouth, he talked about newcomer king. It seemed like this brat had made up his mind to use him as a stepping stone. Lin Yi clearly saw the horse's intention to use as a spear. "What I'm best at isn't actually showing off, but fighting against those with higher cultivation levels. So, I'll say the ugly words first. Not to mention the middle stage of nascent soul. I've even killed a profound ascending stage cultivator. You better be mentally prepared. Mysterious ascension stage." Everyone was stunned, and then they all took a deep breath. Some of them hadn't even heard of this realm, let alone seen it in person. Lin Yi could even kill a mystic ascending stage master? This isn't a joke, right? Ma Daoqiang was just as stunned as everyone else. After a while, he suddenly burst into laughter. Pointing at Lin Yi and gasping for breath, he said, "Ha ha ha ha. I don't think you're a pretentious person. In fact, you're just a braggart, right? When people brag, they at least have a draft in their mind. There's a limit to your self-deception. You can even kill a profound ascending stage cultivator. They didn't die because of you, they died because of you, right? Not to mention Ma Daoqiang and the onlookers. Even Lu Bianren and the others who heard Lin Yi's words couldn't help but feel a little strange. They believed that with Lin Yi's strength, he could kill a middle-stage nascent soul master. But a profound ascending stage cultivator? That's way too far off, right? Little did they know that Lin Yi was telling the truth. He would never reveal his strength in public. Now that he finally told the truth, it was taken as a joke. This really made people not know whether to laugh or cry. But this was the effect he wanted. If everyone would take it seriously, there was no way he would reveal such details in front of everyone. Concealing the truth was the way of the king. Seeing Lin Yi's unmoved expression, Ma Daoqiang, who had been laughing for a long time, suddenly had a cold expression. Pointing at Lin Yi's nose, he said, "Okay, since you're so arrogant, then I'll challenge you now. Do you dare to accept? You can even kill a profound ascending stage cultivator. You're not afraid of me, a middle stage nascent soul master, are you?" Everyone's eyes were focused on Lin Yi, waiting for his reply. They wanted to watch a good show, and they even wanted to agree on Lin Yi's behalf. Unfortunately, Lin Yi didn't care at all. He curled his lips and said, "I'm not interested. Go play somewhere else." Ignored again. This kind of feeling made Ma Daoqiang angry again. He could see that the disdain Lin Yi revealed when he said this was not fake, but he really didn't want to bother with him. Ma Daoqiang suddenly exploded in anger. A peak early nascent soul stage cultivator. What qualifications does he have to look down on me? You're not afraid, are you? Ma Daoqiang wouldn't give up so easily. He immediately stared at Lu Bianren and others with an unfriendly face. If you really don't agree, then I can't do anything about it. But I've always had a bad temper. In order to vent my anger, I may have to kill a few people. I feel like a bitter guy. Lu Bianren, your stupid brothers are good targets to vent your anger on. What do you think? When Lin Yi heard this, his eyes suddenly became cold. He really didn't want to deal with this kind of trash. In his eyes, Ma Daoqiang was nothing more than a clown. After all, the North Island was different from the chaotic Nanzhou Sea area. Lin Yi couldn't kill people casually, especially Ma Daoqiang was the so-called super rookie king. Once he killed him in public, there would be a lot of trouble later. Lin Yi didn't have time to waste on this kind of thing. However, Lin Yi could ignore this kind of clown. But he couldn't ignore the brothers around him. Ma Daoqiang dared to threaten senior brother Ku Bianren and others. Even if it was a little troublesome, Lin Yi couldn't sit back and do nothing anymore. Now that you mention it, it's you who attacked senior brother Ku Bianren and others just now, right? Lin Yi looked at Ma Daoqiang calmly and said, "Yes, it's me. Now you want to stand up for them?" Ma Daoqiang sneered fearlessly and said, "Oh, by the way, I can tell you one more thing. Last time, if someone hadn't disturbed me, they would have died in my hands. If you don't believe me, you can ask senior brother Ku Bianren if the wound on his thigh is completely healed." Ha 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 ha. Is that true? Lin Yi turned his head and asked. Senior brother Ku Bianren and others looked at each other and nodded. Although it was dishonorable, there was nothing to hide, especially in front of Lin Yi. Anyway, he would know it sooner or later. Okay, I got it. As you wish. Lin Yi's temperament suddenly became colder. Since Ma Daoqiang had almost killed senior brother Ku Bianren and others, he couldn't be regarded as a simple clown, but a thorough enemy. Since he was an enemy, there was no need to be polite. Chapter 4605. Then without another word he made his move. It was the same move he used against Lu Bianren and the others. However, this time, against Lin Yi, the power and speed of this move were completely different. An extremely thin fissure appeared beneath Lin Yi's feet. If one didn't have amazing eyesight, they wouldn't be able to see it unless they looked carefully. The fissure was small, but the commotion was not small at all. A loud rumble sounded, as if thunder had exploded beneath the ground, shocking everyone's soul. When the spectators outside saw this, they were all shocked and quickly found a place to hide. Although the ground hadn't moved yet, everyone knew that a storm was brewing. The horse-blocking spear was only a technique used to lock onto the target. Once the power of the technique exploded, the entire place would be razed to the ground in an instant. After all, this was a battle between two nascent soul experts. Even if the bystanders were to be touched by the shockwave, it would be fatal. Let me tell you one last time. This technique of mine is called Birth of the Earth Dragon. The last time I used it, a middle stage original level cultivator died. If you have any last words, you better say them now. Otherwise, you won't be able to die in peace. At this point, Ma Dang was still in the mood to talk. Of course, there is no need to run. You have been locked onto by my soul. No matter where you run, the Earth Dragon will appear beneath your feet. I'm not afraid to tell you that you can't escape from this technique. Ha 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 ha. Earth Dragon. Lin Yi's lips curled up into a playful smile as he said faintly, "What a coincidence. This move of mine is also a dragon. I just don't know if your Earth Dragon can block my dragon." Dragon? Dragon my ass. You're still so stubborn even when you're about to die. Ma Dangchang laughed loudly, and then his eyes suddenly narrowed. The rumbling sound suddenly became even more shocking, giving people the feeling that there was a peerless beast under the ground that was about to jump out and devour people. Not far away, the slightly weaker people were scared to the ground on the spot. The power of a full-force attack from a Yuanying stage master was really not something that ordinary people could withstand. The spectators who were previously excited quickly retreated further and further away. Based on this terrifying momentum, Ma Dang's Birth of the Earth Dragon would probably raise everything within a 10-mile radius to the ground. Even if they protected their bodies with true qi, they would still be caught in the crossfire. Lu Bianren and the others did not dodge like the others. They still stood behind Lin Yi like before. Unless Lin Yi told them to retreat, they would have to face the same difficulties even if they died. The corner of Lin Yi's mouth was still curled up in a playful smile. He didn't seem to make any response. He just stood there quietly, looking at Ma Jingjing, who thought that victory was in his grasp. Yo! As expected of the previous rookie king, disregarding everything else, he was quite tactful. He knew that he couldn't run, so he decided not to run, right? Haha, you have guts, but it's a pity that your life isn't long enough. Ma Daoqiang continued to seize the opportunity to ridicule. In his eyes, Lin Yi was already a dead man. Are you saying that my life isn't long enough? Then I'll wait and see. Maybe God won't let me die so early? Lin Yi smiled faintly. Suddenly, he turned his head and looked at the guild manager who was hiding in a corner, trembling with fear. Could you please bring me a stool? I'm travel-weary and can rest my feet. Ah, a stool? The guild manager was suddenly dumbfounded. If it weren't for his position, he would have fled far away like the others. Why would he stay here and wait to be buried with others? However, with his identity, if he just ran away and let the North Island Cultivators Guild become a ruin, he would definitely suffer a fate worse than death. It was better to stay and use the trick of injuring himself to gain confidence. Maybe he could get a reward for sticking to his post. Seeing that the guild manager was trembling with fear and didn't dare to move, Lin Yi smiled and shook his head. He pulled a stool from the side. He just sat down calmly in front of Ma Daoqiang, as if nothing had happened. Looking at this scene, everyone was dumbfounded. What was going on? He knew that he couldn't beat Ma Daoqiang, so he simply admitted defeat. But it didn't look like it. But it was absolutely impossible for Lin Yi to ignore Ma Daoqiang's attack. In any case, Ma Daoqiang's strength was superior. It didn't make sense that a master at the peak of the early stage of nascent soul could ignore the killer move of a master at the middle stage of nascent soul. Right? Everyone was just shocked. At this moment Ma Daoqiang, who was standing opposite Lin Yi, was about to go crazy. To be honest, although he was determined to trample Lin Yi under his feet, since Lin Yi showed the strength of the early stage of nascent soul, he had already put away the thought of underestimating his enemy. Combined with the past rumors about Lin Yi, he knew that this guy was not so easy to deal with. But he still had absolute confidence in himself. The birth of the Earth Dragon could even kill a master at the middle stage of nascent soul. let alone a master at the peak of the early stage of nascent soul. I don't care what you're trying to do. I'll kill you first. Ma Daoqiang was sure that Lin Yi was definitely bluffing. His birth of the Earth Dragon was already prepared. This was his trump card. Not only was it extremely powerful, but it also had a very fatal right after it was used. Every martial art had a time to be used. The only difference was that it was a little faster and a little slower. With the time, it meant that there was a flaw, which meant that it could be targeted. But Ma Daoqiang's birth of the Earth Dragon was out of this norm. This was not because it didn't have a time to be used, but because it had a backup right. After the birth of the Earth Dragon was used, as long as Ma Daoqiang could use his divine sense to lock onto his opponent, then he could control the time of the Earth Dragon's birth at will. From the beginning to the end, the Earth Dragon would be entrenched under the opponent's feet. With a single thought, the opponent would be hit. The whole process would not leave any time for the opponent to react. If the opponent dared to make a move at this time, then he would definitely be courting death. This was the so-called backup right, and also Ma Daoqiang's most terrifying trump card. And during this process, the longer the Earth Dragon was held, the more powerful it would be. Therefore, it could be said that Ma Daoqiang had the initiative from the beginning to the end. Unless Lin Yi took the initiative to attack before he made a move, there was no suspense at all in this battle. At least in Ma Daoqiang's eyes, there was no suspense at all. Ma Daoqiang originally wanted to take advantage of the flaw in Lin Yi's attack. But looking at Lin Yi's current posture, he didn't have the slightest intention of making a move. Since he couldn't wait for Lin Yi to make a move, he could only take the initiative to gain the upper hand. After all, if the Earth Dragon was held down for too long, something would happen. Its current power was already enough to kill any peak early nascent soul realm expert. He didn't believe that Lin Yi could block it. Chapter 4606. Everyone's nerves shuddered. Many people didn't even care about their image, and fell to the ground. Everyone thought that in the next second, everything within a 10-mile radius would be turned into ruins. However, 1 breath passed, 2 breaths passed, 3 breaths passed. Everyone who fell to the ground raised their heads in confusion. Why wasn't there any movement at all? Everyone was staring at Ma Daoqiang, this original infant stage super newcomer. Was he toying with them? Looking at Ma Daoqiang again, he no longer had the arrogance and confidence he had before. Instead, he was drenched in cold sweat because of this strange scene. Why wasn't there any movement at all? Explode. 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 Ma Daoqiang was going crazy. Suddenly, he screamed hysterically, almost causing everyone to have a nervous breakdown. However, the result was the same as before. There was no movement at all. Looking at Lin Yi now, not only was he sitting there calmly, he had even brewed a pot of spiritual tea, and was drinking it leisurely. As he drank, he looked at Ma Daoqiang, as if he was watching a monkey show. Liu Bianren, senior brother Kubai, and the others looked at each other. Their hearts that were hanging in the air were now at ease. Though they didn't know what exactly happened, at least they knew that everything was under Lin Yi's control. Ma Daoqiang was truly enraged this time. His face was as red as a pig's liver. However, he didn't have the slightest reaction. The Earth Dragon's emergence, which had worked every time in the past, was like mud sinking into the ocean this time. There was no reaction at all. Let alone controlling it freely, he couldn't even sense it. Hee, it seems like your Earth Dragon isn't that good. Why don't you try the power of my dragon? Lin Yi took a sip of spiritual tea, a stark contrast to the hysterical Ma Daoqiang. You! Ma Daoqiang cursed angrily. However, he didn't even have the time to fart. Suddenly, he felt an extremely sharp and terrifying murderous aura surging out from the bottom of his feet. Indistinctly, it seemed to be accompanied by a soft dragon's roar. In the next moment, in front of everyone present, Ma Daoqiang actually let out a miserable howl. His knees went soft, and he directly knelt before Lin Yi. The crowd burst into an uproar. Everyone had a look of disbelief on their faces. What the fuck was going on? Lin Yi was just sitting there leisurely drinking tea. Why did he suddenly kneel down in front of him? And he looked like he was in pain. Don't be like this. The fight hasn't even started yet. Why are you kowtowing and admitting defeat? Strange things happen every year. I'm really speechless. Lenny continued to drink the spiritual tea leisurely. He didn't even lift his eyelids. Impossible. This was impossible. Absolutely impossible. Ah. Ma Duqiang cried out in pain. Cold sweat dripped down his face as he looked at Lin Yi. He didn't dare to believe that he would actually lose. Moreover, he would lose in such a way that he couldn't understand at all. Both of his hands protected his knees that were in so much pain that they were about to lose feeling. Glaring bright red blood gushed out uncontrollably. In a short moment, a large patch of the surrounding floor was dyed red. Coupled with Ma Duqiang's hysterical howls of pain, the entire place fell into a strange silence. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. Ma Duqiang, this original infant stage super newcomer king, had always been high and mighty. No matter where he appeared, he would always be arrogant. However, at this moment, the pitiful scene in front of him caused everyone to unconsciously feel a trace of sympathy. To Ma Duqiang, who thought highly of himself, any little bit of so-called sympathy was the greatest humiliation to him. If it was a normal day, if someone dared to look at him like this, Ma Duqiang would definitely fly into a rage and start a fight. But now he couldn't do it. He couldn't even stand up. He could only kneel in front of Lin Yi in extreme humiliation. His dignity and self-confidence were torn apart along with his miserable howls. What else could he use to teach these people a lesson? Fear. At this moment, Ma Duqiang's heart was only filled with deep fear. His mind was blank. He couldn't understand what had just happened. He couldn't understand why he would lose to a mere peak early stage original infant stage expert. Moreover, it was in such a strange and evil way. He didn't even dare to believe what he was experiencing at this moment, and he wondered if this was all a dream. He was a mid-stage original infant stage expert. He was the super newcomer king. He was the invincible and invincible existence in the inner court competition of the three pavilions. He had subverted everyone's understanding and was destined to be a legend in the history of the three pavilions. How could he lose in such a strange and humiliating way? This was absolutely impossible. Ma Duqiang was still deceiving himself. However, the spectators on the side wouldn't be stupid like him. Although no one understood what happened, they at least understood one thing. The collision between the two newcomer kings had already been decided. With just one move, Ma Duqiang, the new super newcomer king, was completely defeated. And he was defeated so miserably that people couldn't even look straight at him. For a moment, everyone looked at Lin Yi with unparalleled awe. In their eyes, a peak early stage original infant stage expert was already a high and powerful existence, especially a legendary figure like Lin Yi. They needed to look up to him, and didn't dare to show any disrespect. Before this, everyone thought that Ma Duqiang would become the new legend of the three pavilions in the North Island. But now, even a fool wouldn't think so. A legend was a legend after all. Chapter 4607. C_T. That's it? Fuck, you made me lose so many spirit jades. What kind of bullshit super rookie king is this? Useless bastard. Someone in the crowd suddenly cursed hatefully. Read the full text. As soon as these words were spoken, a large group of people in the surroundings instantly reacted. Amongst them, 99% of them had won by betting on their horses. This time, they instantly lost all their money, and they cursed incessantly. They wished for nothing more than to drown this good-looking, but useless fellow with their spittle. You guys know nothing. Brother Spear must be deliberately showing weakness to the enemy. When he uses his peerless martial skill, Lin Yi, this outdated rookie king, can wait to die. Ma Jingqiang's lackey shouted unhappily. Yes, Brother Spear is invincible. How can a mere peak early stage nascent soul be Brother Spear's opponent? You have eyes but can't see MT-Tai. The minion that Lin Yi had slapped into the crowd yelled as well, but he was trampled under the feet of the excited crowd once more. It was another stampede. Listening to the clamor of these two lackeys, Lin Yi glanced at the miserable Ma Jingqiang and shook his head speechlessly. It's fine if the boss is crazy, But I didn't expect the two lackeys to be even crazier. You guys are really birds of a feather flocked together. Your boss is already in such a miserable state, and you still have the mood to lie to yourself. Hurry up and send him to the hospital. Don't blame me for not reminding you. In a while, he will have to be amputated. Although I haven't been a doctor for many years, I still know this. Amputate. The lackey glanced at Lin Yi and was about to ridicule him. But suddenly, Ma Zhengqiang's angry roar came from the side. This was a roar he endured the piercing pain and gritted his teeth. Trash! Hurry up and send me to the pill hall. Do you really want me to die here? Lin Yi's words were sarcastic, but it was the truth. Ma Daoqiang could feel how bad his knees were right now. And if he were to delay any longer, he'd probably die. No matter how amazing a divine doctor was, he wouldn't be able to cure him. At that time, he would really become a cripple. He didn't even dare to think about that kind of tragic ending. He was used as a spear by the other party. The underlings were instantly dumbfounded. It turned out that it wasn't what they had imagined at all. After being stunned for a moment, she hurriedly rushed over and carried him on her back. Without another word, he rushed out of the crowd and staggered towards the direction of the pill hall. From the beginning to the end, Lin Yi did not have the slightest intention to stop him. Although he did have a murderous intent when he found out that Ma Dongxiang had almost killed senior brother Ku Bai and the others. With his strength, it would be a piece of cake to kill Ma Dongxiang. However, after thinking about it carefully, he still suppressed this murderous intent. With Lin Yi's current strength and status, it didn't matter whether Ma Daoqiang was dead or alive. With Lin Yi's current strength and status, even if Lin Yi killed him in front of everyone, the three pavilions wouldn't pursue the matter too much. After all, this was a duel, and it was Ma Zhengqiang who initiated it. Who else could be blamed for his lack of strength? Lin Yi didn't care about the life and death of a clown like Ma Zhengqiang, but he wanted to know about this guy's background. Although he had just returned and didn't know much, he could guess that there must be someone behind this guy. Moreover, it was definitely a powerful background that couldn't be underestimated. Otherwise, after Lin Yi, there would be another nascent soul stage super rookie king that suddenly popped out. Did he really think that the ancestors of Blue Cloud Pavilion were emitting green smoke, and that martial arts were flourishing? Watching Ma Zhengqiang and the others flee in a sorry state, the remaining people were speechless for a long time. At this moment, all of them still felt that it was unreal. They couldn't help but look at each other. The showdown between the two rookie kings that was full of gimmicks ended just like that. Before this, Ma Zhengqiang had always been an invincible existence in their eyes, and the public opinion was almost one-sided that he could easily crush the former rookie king Lin Yi. This guy had been clamoring in public and private, saying that he would trample on Lin Yi and eat shit. How did he become trash that could be killed in one move when it came to real combat? Looking at Lin Yi's calm appearance, everyone present couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Everyone present could not help but gulp. Most of them were disciples of the three great pavilions. Many of them were inner disciples, and in terms of qualifications, they were much deeper than Lin Yi. However, at this moment, when they looked at Lin Yi again, they didn't dare to look at him at the same level, but completely looked up to him. According to the unwritten rules of the three pavilions, gold core stage cultivators automatically entered the inner sect, and once the strength of a disciple reached the nascent soul stage, they could be above the disciples and seek the position of a senior brother or an elder. At the very least, they could become a big boss in an important department. And Lin Yi, a transcendent existence that could instantly kill a mid-stage nascent soul stage master. In the eyes of everyone, he would definitely be in the upper echelons of the three pavilions. As for whether he would become an elder or a big boss in a department in the future, it was entirely up to his preference. At the thought that Lin Yi might become their immediate superior in the future, everyone naturally had to be more respectful and try to leave a good impression in front of Lin Yi. Pavilion Master Kusan, long time no see. How have you been? Chapter 4608. On the other hand, The group of people around Lin Yi was a rare spectacle. Although the guild manager didn't know whether to laugh or cry, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was a huge disparity in strength between Lin Yi and Ma Daoqiang. Otherwise, if the two nascent soul stage experts were to fight, his place would have been razed to the ground. It was all thanks to Lin Yi that he was able to escape this calamity. Wave after wave of people squeezed over to get close to them. Many of them were disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion. Normally, they would see each other all the time. Moreover, their senior brothers were all honest people. How could they be so thick-skinned as to reject them? They could only brace themselves and deal with them one by one. Only Lin Yi was happy and leisurely sipping on his spiritual tea. The guild manager was very tactful and gave him a pot of high-grade spiritual tea. He had kept this tea for many years, but he couldn't bear to drink it. This time, in order to befriend Lin Yi, he had spent a lot of money. Amidst the commotion, the crowded crowd suddenly parted to form a small path. At first, the people in front were still grumbling, but when they saw the people behind them, they immediately lowered their heads respectfully and made way for them quickly. Lin Yi was slightly surprised, but he immediately smiled. Among the crowd, little Curly Bear stepped on everyone's heads and climbed onto Lin Yi's body, riding on Lin Yi's neck excitedly. At the same time, a beautiful woman appeared in front of Lin Yi. It was Shanghai Laner. Looking at this little senior sister who couldn't hide her excitement like little Curly Bear, Lin Yi couldn't help but be slightly dazed. After a year and a half, although Shanghai Laner was still as innocent as before, her figure and temperament had matured a bit. She was fresh and pure, with a hint of charm that made people blush unconsciously. Lin Yi had already seen all kinds of beauties, and all of his confidants were peerless beauties. However, when he saw Shangguan Laner this time, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This lass was really a natural beauty. She was already making people unable to control themselves. When she fully grew up in the future, every frown and smile of hers would be enough to seduce people's souls. Little junior brother, are you injured? Shanghai Laner did not have the slightest awareness of the femme fatale. Perhaps it was because she prayed for Lin Yi every day. After a year and a half, she did not have the slightest sense of alienation. Ignoring everyone's strange eyes, she hopped to Lin Yi's side. He even pushed the little Curly Bear to the side, and the master and pet each skillfully occupied one of Lin Yi's arms. No. Lin Yi smiled and shook his head. He couldn't help but ask, "How did you know I was here?" Grandpa told me. He said that you were entangled by the guy who used horses as spears, so I came to see you. Shanghai Laner stuck out her tongue with a smile, and she was secretly proud of her achievement. If she hadn't asked Grandpa to tell her the news of Lin Yi as soon as possible last time, she wouldn't have been able to come so quickly this time. Pavilion Master Shangguan? Lin Yi couldn't help but be stunned. It was not strange that he attracted attention after coming back, but it was very thought-provoking that the news reached the ears of Shanghai Tianhua so quickly. It was really rare for him to be able to make the North Island, a big boss, pay so much attention to him. Little junior brother, you've been in the South Island for so long. What fun things have you encountered? Tell me quickly. I've never been to the South Island in my life. Are there spirit beasts everywhere? Have you seen other curly bears? Shanghai Laner couldn't wait to ask. Except for the North Island. She had been to the Middle Island and the West Island. The former was undoubtedly the center of the Heaven Stage Island, and the latter was the territory of her best friend Ning Xuefei. But the South Island was different. That place was a troublesome place for human cultivators. It didn't matter to ordinary people, but if a top boss in the North Island like Shanghai Tianhua suddenly appeared in the waters of the South Continent, it would cause a big mess. It's a long story. I'll tell you slowly when we go back. Lin Yi smiled and called out to Lu Bianren, Ku Qian and the others. Then, under the escort of a large group of people, he made his way back to Clear Cloud Pavilion. Theoretically, Lin Yi no longer had a residence in the Blue Cloud Pavilion. His original residence, number 1, had been occupied by Ma Weiqiang a long time ago. However, when Lin Yi heard this, he just smiled indifferently. Ma Weiqiang could occupy number 1 residence because he hadn't returned. Now that he was back, what could Ma Weiqiang do? Lin Yi immediately led everyone directly to number 1 residence. At the same time, he also sent someone to the Hong Chamber of Commerce to inform Hong Zhong. Then, they immediately prepared a banquet in number 1 residence. The group of people with Lin Yi's tag gathered together and laughed happily to welcome Lin Yi. Other than that, Lin Yi didn't greet anyone else. According to the rules, he had been missing for so long, especially when Ma Weiqiang's knees were crippled as soon as he came back. No matter what, he had to report to the higher-ups of the Blue Cloud Pavilion. However, Lin Yi didn't have this thought at all. Right now, he didn't have a good impression of these so-called higher-ups of the Blue Cloud Pavilion. They actually supported Ma Weiqiang to occupy his residence. It was simply intolerable. If it was someone with a more explosive temper, they would definitely go to their door. However, Lin Yi didn't have the leisure to do so, so he simply chose to ignore it. Anyway, from today onwards, number 1 residence would be under his name. If there was any elder who was dissatisfied, he could ask him to come and talk to them face to face. He was afraid that these people wouldn't have the guts to do so. To be honest, before Lin Yi went to Nanzhou, he thought that those who could become an elder of the Blue Cloud Pavilion were not simple characters. However, things were different now. He could even kill a profound ascension practitioner in one hit. As for those so-called elders who were mostly at nascent soul, it would be a miracle if they held any weight in his eyes. Lin Yi and the others were busy preparing for the banquet in residence number 1. In comparison, Ma Weiqiang, who was the owner in name, was in a really bad situation. His knees had been crushed by Lin Yi's killing aura. Although it wasn't to the extent that he would become a cripple, it wasn't something that could be easily healed with the medical skills of the North Island Elixir Hall. Even if it was an optimistic estimate, it would take at least half a year for him to recover. Unless a doctor like Zhang Liju personally treated him, he would be a complete cripple for the next half a year. He really did live up to his own words, staying at home to recuperate all day without seeing the light of day. After getting treated at the Elixir Hall, Ma Weiqiang didn't stay here to recuperate. Chapter 4609. Ma Daiqiang was wrapped in thick bandages, and his 2 underlings carried him back to Blue Cloud Pavilion Residence number 1. After all, the environment here was much better than the Hall of Alchemy, and it was more suitable for recuperation. However, when he saw residence number 1 was brightly lit, and he heard the sounds of laughter coming from inside, Ma Daiqiang's already miserable face turned even paler. He even wanted to occupy his own residence. Damn it, this bastard Lin Yi had gone too far. Brother Daiqiang, what should we do? The 2 underlings looked at Ma Daiqiang awkwardly. Listening to the voices of Lin Yi and the others, they didn't even dare to go within 100 feet, let alone enter the main door. Even Ma Daiqiang, with his strength, almost died without knowing why. If it were them, wouldn't they be looking for death? The 2 underlings were afraid, but Ma Daiqiang himself was even more afraid. He couldn't help but tremble when he thought of Lin Yi's name. Losing wasn't scary, but what was scary was not knowing how he lost, and how big was the difference in strength between them. Ma Daiqiang didn't dare to think deeper, and he didn't dare to face Lin Yi again. Although residence number 1 still belonged to him in name, he wouldn't dare to ask Lin Yi for it even if he was given 10,000 guts. He was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. Bring me to Soaring Pavilion. I want to find Chong Bro, hurry. Ma Daiqiang yelled hysterically. Under the stimulation of his anger, the wounds on his legs that hadn't healed started bleeding again, and he almost fainted from the pain, but he forced himself to hold on. He couldn't bear this anger even if he was beaten to death. He wasn't willing to accept it. The 2 lackeys did not dare to neglect, and immediately carried the horse as a spear to the Soaring Sky Pavilion. They did not care that the sky was getting dark, and knocked on the door in the middle of the night. They hurriedly carried the horse into Su Lingchong's residence. This place was the same as Blue Cloud Pavilion Residence number 1, and it was also brightly lit. It wasn't just Su Lingchong himself. Meng Tong, Kong Mingming, and Zheng Pingyang were all present as well. Today was their usual meeting day. When they saw Ma Dongqiang's miserable appearance at the moment, Su Lingchong and others were instantly stunned. Ma Dongqiang had just told them in the morning that he was going to set off for the South Island. Why did he suddenly become so miserable? Brother Chong, I saw Lin Yi. Ma Daoqiang's first words shocked everyone. The news of Lin Yi's return had already spread like wildfire outside, but they had been locked up in the meeting room all this time, so they had no idea about it. Upon hearing this name that made people gnash their teeth in hatred, but there was nothing they could do about it. Su Lingchong and the others' expressions changed subtly, especially Pin Liang, who was secretly surprised. He Lu Bianren and the others had been worried about Lin Yi, and now he could finally relax. Lin Yi, when did this guy come back? Su Lingchong's expression changed. Today. I met him when I went to the North Island Cultivators Guild to take a mission, and then. Ma Dongqiang looked down at the bandage on his leg that was soaked with blood, and said with grief and indignation, "It's all because of this bastard Lin Yi that I ended up in this situation. Brother Chong, you have to help me." "Did you fight with him?" Su Lingchong frowned and glanced at his knee. "Yes, I wanted to help you, Brother Chong. So I challenged him in public. But I didn't expect this bastard to be more powerful than I thought. I accidentally fell into his trap. Brother Chong, you have to get back at him. Don't let that bastard get carried away." Ma Dongqiang said embarrassedly. Although he had been traumatized by Lin Yi's unfathomable means in his heart, he couldn't admit defeat verbally. Otherwise, how could he go out and meet people? Ma Dongqiang looked at Su Lingchong with a burning gaze. They had always been at odds with Lin Yi, and the reason why they went against Lin Yi this time was also because of the mission he gave them. Therefore, it was reasonable for Su Lingchong to stand up for him. And with young Master Su's strength, he would definitely not let that bastard Lin Yi have it easy. When the time comes, he would definitely be able to get back at him. However, Su Lingchong's next sentence made him dumbfounded. "Are you crazy? Is your brain filled with shit?" "Ha." Ma Dongqiang didn't react for a moment. "I asked you to find out information about Lin Yi. But did I say that I asked you to provoke him? Did I ask you to find trouble with him?" Su Lingchong said expressionlessly. But. Ma Dongqiang immediately had a wronged expression. When he gave the mission, Su Lingchong indeed didn't say anything about dealing with Lin Yi. But when everyone talked about Lin Yi during meetings, they would always be filled with righteous indignation, as if they wanted to tear that bastard into pieces. Furthermore, didn't they go through so much trouble to find Lin Yi just to deal with him? Could it be that they were wrong? But my ass. Even I don't dare to easily go against that bastard. And you still want to go? Do you think that you're more capable than me? Su Lingchong's face darkened as he turned around and pointed at the others. "Come. You go and ask them. Ask them. Who among them dares to find trouble with Lin Yi alone?" Ma Dongqiang heard that, and looked at everyone. His gaze swept across Meng Tong, Kong Mingming, and Zhong Pingliang, only to find that all of them were shaking their heads. He was completely stunned. As far as he knew, these people weren't cowards. Why were they so afraid of that bastard Lin Yi? Normally, even if their strength was slightly inferior, they wouldn't shake their heads so resolutely. It was as if the words, "I'm afraid of Lin Yi," were written on their faces. Did they not even want the most basic of face? Unfortunately, he didn't expect that even though Su Lingchong and the others were prideful people, they weren't idiots. After suffering so many losses at Lin Yi's hands, if they still didn't learn their lesson after this, then it could only be said that there was something wrong with their brains. "See, you idiot. Everyone here has a higher status than you. So many of them don't dare to provoke Lin Yi, and only you dare? You even dared to challenge him in front of everyone? You're lucky that he didn't kill you this time." Su Lingchong pointed at Ma Dongqiang's nose and scolded. "I told you to go and find information, not to send you to your death. Do you think that your wings have hardened, and you can ignore this young master's words?" "No, I don't dare." Ma Dongqiang quickly shook his head. His already ugly face instantly turned even paler. If Su Lingchong really thought that he was disloyal, then he was dead meat. "I know that you've been in the limelight recently. What nascent soul super rookie king? What big 3 pavilion's future successor? So you think that you're strong, right? Let me tell you, Brother Meng and I were much stronger than you back then. But even then, we couldn't defeat Lin Yi. Who do you think you are?" You're so stupid that even a pig would be blinded by you. Su Lingchong continued to scold, not caring about his image as a young master. Chapter 46:10. In actuality, the reason why he was so angry wasn't necessarily because Ma Zhongqiang had suffered a huge loss at Lin Yi's hands. In fact, Ma Zhongqiang's life or death didn't matter to him at all. After all, he was just a chess piece that didn't matter. The reason why he was so furious this time was actually because of Lin Yi. After not seeing him for a year and a half, he thought that he had far surpassed Lin Yi, but he did not expect that Lin Yi's strength seemed to have improved much more than his. Listening to Ma Daiqiang's description, he knew that with the strength of this guy at the middle stage of Yuanying realm, he could not even find out the details of Lin Yi's strength. It showed that he was a total waste, but it also showed that Lin Yi's strength was unfathomable. This unexpected outcome was simply like a pail of cold water to Su Lingchong, who was in high spirits recently. It would be strange if he didn't flare up in rage even after all this happened. Being used as a spear was like having bad luck and becoming his punching bag. Brother Chong, please calm down. I know I was wrong. Please calm down. Ma Daiqiang was afraid that Su Lingchong would do something to him in his rage. Regardless of his injury, he quickly turned over from the stretcher, gritted his teeth and half knelt in front of Su Lingchong, kowtowing to apologize. At this time he wanted to slap himself 14,000 times. If he had known that this would be the result, he would not have dared to challenge Lin, even if he had 10,000 guts. Before coming here, he thought that Su Lingchong would avenge him, but he did not expect that young Master Su would have such a reaction. Before this, Su Lingchong had always been arrogant. Every time he had a meeting, he would have a heroic spirit of pointing out the country. Ma Daiqiang even naively thought that there was nothing that young Master Su could not handle in the 3 pavilions of the North Island. After all, young Master Su not only had strong strength, but also had a mysterious person behind him. Little did he know that the reason why Su Lingchong could be so arrogant was that Lin Yi was not there. Otherwise, he would definitely have restrained himself. The bloody lesson a year and a half ago was still vivid in his mind. Su Lingchong's rage soared to the heavens, and he pointed at Ma Dun's nose and scolded for a long time, before his rage finally subsided a little. He snorted coldly and said, "Get lost." "Ah, brother. Brother Chong, please spare my life. This lowly one won't dare to do it again. This lowly one swears to the heavens that I've always done my best for Brother Chong, and have never been disrespectful." Ma Daiqiang was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He immediately hugged Su Lingchong's leg and begged with tears and snot. According to the rules of their organization, Su Lingchong was his only immediate superior. Once Su Lingchong asked him to scram, it would be seen as a betrayal in the eyes of the organization, and he would definitely die. At that time, even death would be an extravagant dream, and living a life worse than death would be the only outcome for him. "What nonsense are you talking about? I told you to go back and recuperate. Still not scramming?" Su Lingchong said with a frown. "Oh yes. Thank you for your kindness, Brother Chong. Thank you for your kindness, Brother Chong." Only then did Ma Daiqiang react. He hurriedly kowtowed and thanked Su Lingchong, afraid that he would change his mind when Su Lingchong saw him in trouble. If that happened, he would really not be able to find his grave even if he cried. He watched as Ma Daiqiang rolled and crawled out of the door. Su Lingchong turned his head and looked at the others. He sighed and said, "What do you guys think we should do now?" He was naturally referring to Lin Yi. To all of them, Lin Yi was a huge rock weighing down on them. Even though they were much stronger than before, Lin Yi was still a burden to them. Although their current strength was not what it used to be, if they were to face Lin Yi like this, they really did not have the confidence, including Su Lingchong himself. All of them could not help but feel weak in their hearts. "Young Master Su, with our strength, although we don't have to be afraid of that fellow Lin Yi, since he could so easily kill Ma Daiqiang, it means that we cannot underestimate him. If we were to face him alone, we might not have any chance of winning. Why don't we ask for the opinion of the higher-ups first?" Kong Mingming said after some consideration. "Brother Ming, what do you think?" Su Lingchong turned his head to look at Meng Tong. He might not care about the opinions of others, but Meng Tong was different. He now trusted Meng Tong more than anyone else. What Xiaoming said makes sense. Before we know the details of Lin Yi's strength, we really can't act rashly. Meng Tong's temperament was much calmer. He paused and said, "Previously, the higher-ups asked us to inquire about Lin Yi's news. This time we have completed the task. It's not a bad idea to ask for their opinion." "Okay, then let's do it." Su Lingchong immediately made a decision. Although scolding Ma Daqiang had dissipated a lot of his anger, he could not just leave Lin Yi alone. It was better to use this as an excuse to ask for advice and see if the mysterious man could help. After writing down the cause and effect of this matter in the form of a code, Su Lingchong then released a spirit beast from the underground secret room. It looked like a vampire bat. It was very small but extremely fast. This was given to him by the mysterious man for communication. Even a master of the nascent soul stage would find it difficult to intercept it on the way. It was extremely safe. Somewhere in the North Island, the vampire bat quietly flashed into an underground secret room at a speed that was hard to be seen by the naked eye. Suddenly, it was wrapped by a faintly discernible vital qi, and the coded note on its back fell into the hands of the mysterious man in black. After reading the contents of the note, the mysterious man in black did not show any surprised expression. It seemed that he had known about this matter for a long time. After a moment of silence, he got up and walked to another secret room that was even more core. At this moment, a woman was sitting in the secret room, and in front of her was a supercomputer that was extremely rare even in the secular world. It seemed to be calculating something. "Miss Luan, this is the news that Su Lingchong just sent. Please have a look." The mysterious man respectfully handed the note to the woman. "Oh, he wants to deal with Lin Yi?" The woman called Miss Luan smiled slightly. With all the conflicts between them and Lin Yi, it's not surprising that they have this kind of idea. However, this time he acted on his own initiative. It seems that he was frightened by Lin Yi's strength. The mysterious man said faintly, "He has only stayed in the South Continent for a year and a half, but his strength has changed from the gold core stage to the nascent soul stage. He can even defeat the master of the nascent soul stage with one move. It seems that this Lin Yi has had a lot of adventures in the South Continent. He really can't be underestimated." Miss Luan said in an unpredictable tone. "What does Miss Luan mean?" The mysterious man asked. "Keep an eye on them first. Don't let them act rashly. I have already told you about Lin Yi. Keep him alive. Maybe he will become our trump card in the future. At that time, he may be of great use. However, if he dies now, that group of people may go crazy. Dr. Li will be in big trouble." Miss Luan said faintly. Chapter 46:11. I understand. I will go and warn Su Lingchong now, in case they make their own decisions and ruin our plan. The mysterious man nodded. "Okay, go ahead. You have been doing well recently. The biochemical agent for nascent soul stage is finally done. Although there is still a slight flaw in the stability aspect, this kind of thing is inevitable. At most, we will just lose a few more people. This price is still bearable." Miss Luan had a rare relaxed smile on her face. "Thank you for the compliment, Miss Luan. This is my duty." The mysterious man lowered his head slightly. "Hee, you are not arrogant and rash. This is what I admire about you. You are much more reliable than the other mediocre people. If there are a few more people like you, our center will have great plans." The smile on Miss Luan's face became even wider, and then she said, "The nascent soul stage biochemical potion is only the first step. The next goal is the profound ascension stage. The difficulty of this breakthrough is much more difficult than the nascent soul stage. There must be no mistakes in this matter. The two idiots in the Devil Cold Sea are useless. You should choose 2 more people to go." "Then how about Su Lingchong and Meng Tong?" The mysterious man thought for a while and suggested. These 2 were the ones he had the highest hopes for, and it was rare for them to complement each other. As long as they were trained well, they would definitely become his right-hand men in the future. Since Miss Luan wanted to change the supervisor of Devil Lunghui, it was a rare opportunity for the 2 of them to train. And at the same time, they could avoid Lin Yi. It was killing two birds with one stone. Let me recommend someone to you. That Zhong Pingliang is not bad. Let's promote him to a small leader. Miss Luan thought for a while and suddenly said, "Huh." The mysterious man was stunned when he heard that. Miss Luan was such a high and mighty person. Why would she pay attention to a small fry like Zhong Pingliang? This was a little strange. Although Zhong Pingliang had also joined the center, and it was not a long time, not a short time, at least 2 years ago, he had never really entered the eyes of the mysterious man. At most, he was a cannon fodder. If it wasn't for his good memory, even he might not have remembered this name. He was even stunned for a while before he finally remembered it, let alone Miss Luan. What? Do you have any objections? Miss Luan glanced at the mysterious man. No, this subordinate understands. The mysterious man quickly nodded. Although he wasn't expecting Pingliang, it was a small matter that didn't affect the bigger picture. They were in need of manpower anyway, and there was no need to worry about not having enough space to promote people like Meng Tong. Oh, by the way, I heard that little Pao is about to come out of seclusion. When the time comes, I'll ask him to come over and help you. You two can discuss and handle everything. I might have to leave for the Eastern continent soon, Miss Luan said. Junior brother Pao has come out of seclusion? Great, I've been waiting for him for a long time. The mysterious man's eyes lit up when he heard that. Although junior brother Pao would definitely take away some of the power he had now, if he could take the opportunity to make friends with this person, it would be more beneficial than harmful in the long run. Yeah, this Zhong Pingliang I was talking about was actually the one who recommended him to me. You just have to be careful. You and little Pao are the core members of the center. When the time comes, you must work together sincerely. I don't want the two of you to fall out. Do you understand? Miss Luan urged. I understand. Junior brother Pao and I hit it off very well. And junior brother Pao is a person who cares about the overall situation. Everything he does is important to the center. I will definitely take care of the matters on the North Island with junior brother Pao. I won't let Miss Luan have any worries. The mysterious man solemnly promised. The North Island is only secondary. In the future, you can slowly let Su Lingchong and Zhong Pingliang take care of it. Both of you have to focus on the South Island. I have something for you to do. Miss Luan shook her head slightly. Yes. The mysterious man nodded heavily. Although he was wondering what kind of task there was on the South Island that required him and junior brother Pao to do it so seriously, he just suppressed his doubts in his heart. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, and don't look at what you shouldn't look at. This was the most important survival rule in the center. Okay, if there's nothing else, you can leave first. Miss Luan's eyes then returned to the supercomputer. Any kind of biochemical medicine needed to go through countless calculations and evolutions. Only after the plan was formed could it enter the formal experimental stage. She was now preparing for the biochemical medicine of the Xianshan stage. Yes, I will leave now. The mysterious man immediately bowed and left the room. Until he left the room, a trace of puzzlement and doubt appeared on his emotionless face. He was still wondering why junior brother Pao suddenly recommended Zhong Pingliang. With his influence and control over the North Island, nothing could escape from his surveillance. As far as he knew, Zhong Pingliang had never shown anything strange since he joined the Yingxin Pavilion. He gave people the impression that he was just a follower of Kong Mingming. After that, he became Su Lingchong's subordinate because of Kong Mingming. Other than that, he had no other connections. Pingliang himself, on the other hand, had decent talent, but he wasn't that outstanding. At least he couldn't be compared to Lin Yi, a freak who kept rising up miraculously. He'd been quiet all this time, and he hadn't done anything earth-shattering. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have had anything to do with Brother Pao at all. Could it be that they had crossed paths in the secular world? The mysterious man was suddenly shocked. In his eyes, everything about Zhong Pingliang was too ordinary. After thinking about it, the only place where he could have crossed paths with junior brother Pao seemed to be the secular world. However, he could do whatever he wanted in the North Island. He didn't know anything about the secular world. However, Even if he was suspicious, he wouldn't do anything to Zhong Pingliang. Since junior brother Pao wanted to help Zhong Pingliang, he naturally wouldn't offend him for such a small matter. It was just a small effort to push the boat along with the current, and he could also get a favor. No matter how he looked at it, it was not a loss. The reason why the mysterious man valued junior brother Pao so much was not only because of his strong background, but also because he heard that junior brother Pao had obtained the core inheritance of the ruins of the Day and Day sect. His current strength was very powerful, and he might not even be a match for him. In Heavenly Island, strength was king. If junior brother Pao only had a strong background, even if the mysterious man valued him, he wouldn't care so much. At most, he would just use him. However, if junior brother Pao had both strength and background, it was a different story. It was worth making a good friend. Chapter 46:12. After returning to his room, the mysterious man quickly sent a message to Su Lingchong, asking him to take Zhong Pingliang to a secret room. Of course, it wasn't the core of the North Island base, but another secret room to hide from the public. Let Zhong Pingliang go with us? Su Lingchong looked at the contents of the note and couldn't help but be stunned. He thought that the mysterious man was ready to deal with Lin Yi. Why did he suddenly send such a strange order? Was it written wrongly? It was more likely that he and Meng Tong were together. Although he guessed so in his heart, Su Lingchong didn't dare to change the order of the mysterious man, even if he had the guts. Who knew if there was a deeper meaning in it? Pingliang, you come with me. The higher-ups want to see you. Su Lingchong suppressed his confusion and announced in public. At this time, the others hadn't left yet. Meng Tong and Kong Mingming heard it and suddenly felt strange. Everyone's eyes involuntarily focused on Zhong Pingliang. Zhong Pingliang looked blank on the surface, but at the moment he was horrified. In an instant he was covered in a cold sweat. His first reaction when he heard this was, fuck, did the fact that I was a spy get exposed? In terms of status, he was only slightly higher than people like Ma Daqiang. Not to mention Su Lingchong, even Meng Tong was far from him. At most he was about the same as Kong Xiaoming or even worse. After all, Kong Xiaoming had Elder Xianqian as his backer in Middle Island, and Zhong Pingliang had nothing. Since joining the organization until now, not only Zhong Pingliang, but other people including Meng Tong and Kong Mingming had never been officially met by the mysterious man. This had always been a special honor for Su Lingchong. If it wasn't exposed, how could this opportunity fall into his hands inexplicably? Facing the envious eyes of everyone, Zhong Pingliang couldn't help but feel like his heart was beating wildly. It really felt like something big was going to happen. There couldn't be a second explanation other than the exposure. Asking him to follow Su Lingchong to meet the mysterious man. Wasn't it obvious that he was walking into a trap? Pingliang's expression froze, and a chill ran down his spine. His legs grew heavy, and he couldn't move for a long time. Let's go. What are you waiting for? You look like you've never seen the world before. Su Lingchong looked at him strangely, thinking that he was just too happy to contain his joy. Yes. Pingliang suppressed the fear in his heart when he saw everyone looking at him with a complicated expression. He couldn't show it on his face, he could only take it one step at a time. Under the cover of the night, Su Lingchong and Pingliang avoided the guard's line of sight as they made their way to a barren slope. There was a dense pine forest at the top of the slope, and the secret room the mysterious man had pointed at was right below it. Pingliang was trembling as he followed behind Su Lingchong. His heart was pounding so hard that it was about to jump out of his throat. There were a few times when he couldn't help but turn around and run away as he looked at the dark, windy night. But he stopped himself in the end. After all, Su Lingchong was much stronger than him, and he couldn't run even if he wanted to. He would only die faster if he was exposed. The two of them waited in the secret room. Pingliang held his breath as he carefully studied the layout of the secret room, planning his escape route in his mind. If it didn't work, he would have to fight to the death. After a tense moment of waiting, a breeze swept past them, and the mysterious man's figure appeared in front of them, still covered in a black robe. No one could see his face and body clearly. Of course, Pinliang didn't dare look at him for too long under these circumstances. He could only lower his head, trying his best not to let the mysterious man see his frozen expression. "Greetings, senior." Su Lingchong knelt down on one knee. Although he was valued by the mysterious man, he still didn't know who the mysterious man was, nor did he know his position. He only knew that the mysterious man had a very high position in the center, and so he could only greet him with a vague title like senior. Pinliang didn't dare to be slow. He imitated Su Lingchong and bowed, at the same time taking the opportunity to bury his head even deeper, afraid that the mysterious man would see through his face. The mysterious man was silent for a moment. He could feel his gaze falling on Pinliang, looking him up and down with suspicion. Suddenly he opened his mouth. "Zhong Pinliang, listen to my order." Pinliang jumped in fright, and his breathing stopped. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop his hands and feet from shaking. What the hell? What he was afraid of happened. Did he really get exposed? Su Lingchong, who was beside him, was also stunned. So the order he got wasn't a mistake. He really was looking for Pinliang. Since when did this kid enter the eyes of the higher-ups? That's really strange. The mysterious man, on the other hand, looked at Pinliang surprised. The guy couldn't hide his nervousness at all. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. The kid didn't look special at all. Why would Junior Pao think so highly of him? The higher-ups have ordered that Pinliang will be promoted to the center's special envoy in the North Island from today onwards. He will be on the same level as Su Lingchong. His main task is to assist me and another master to manage the North Island branch together. The mysterious man announced faintly. Ah! Pinliang was completely stunned. He was even prepared to die. But he didn't expect it to be something like this. The center's special envoy in the North Island? Did he just get a promotion for no reason? Pinliang rubbed his head confused. He didn't do anything recently, and he didn't make any contributions to the center. Why did such a big pie suddenly fall on his head? It wasn't just Zhong Pinliang. Even Su Lingchong was shocked speechless. He looked at the mysterious man in confusion. What was going on? How did Pinliang get promoted all of a sudden? He didn't make any contributions at all. And suddenly he was on the same level as him? Senior, there's a saying that two tigers can't share the same mountain. This Pinliang is my follower, and your words made him on the same level as me. It's not easy for me to manage and convince the others. Su Lingchong couldn't help but complain. He didn't have anything against Zhong Pinliang at first, but his follower was suddenly on equal footing with him. Anyone would be pissed off, especially someone as prideful as Su Lingchong. How could he tolerate something like this? Besides, he was the only candidate for the North Island's special envoy. Now that Pinliang suddenly appeared, there were two special envoys. Wasn't this clearly stealing power from his hands? That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.